Hi guys. Tonight we drift back far beyond the edges of written memory to a time when the world feels quieter, slower, and endlessly wide. You find yourself standing on a gentle rise of earth, the ground cool beneath your feet, the air carrying a faint scent of damp soil and distant rain. There are no cities, no roads, no glowing lights in the distance. Only the soft hush of wind brushing across open land and, somewhere far away, the low call of an unseen animal. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, let me know where you are in the world right now and what time it is where you're listening from. Now dim the lights and let yourself settle into this earlier world. You begin to walk slowly forward, though there is no path beneath you. That is one of the first things you notice. There are no clear directions here, no signs or markers, no footprints that last long enough to follow. The earth is soft in places, cracked in others, shaped by wind and water rather than human hands. This is a time before recorded civilization began. In fact, it is long before writing itself exists. If you were to look for a book or even a symbol scratched into stone that clearly tells a story, you would find none. Historians today call this vast stretch of time prehistory simply because there are no written records to guide us. Everything we understand comes from what people left behind in quieter ways. You pause for a moment, crouching down, letting your fingers brush across the ground. The soil feels cool and slightly grainy. Somewhere nearby, a faint crack echoes, perhaps a branch snapping under the weight of a small animal. The world here is alive, but in a way that does not rush or shout, it simply exists. And you might wonder, how do we even know what happened in a time like this? Without written words, how can anyone tell the story? The answer is gentle and patient, much like the world around you. Archaeologists and scientists study the smallest traces, stone tools, bones, patterns in the earth itself. They piece together fragments like assembling a puzzle, without knowing what the final image should look like. One mainstream fact is that the earliest known stone tools date back over 3 million years. These tools are simple, often just rocks chipped in a way that creates a sharp edge. But even something that's simple carries meaning. It tells us that someone somewhere picked up a stone and realized it could be shaped for a purpose. You straighten up again, imagining that moment. A human ancestor holding a rough stone, turning it in their hands, noticing how one edge cuts better than another. There is no instruction manual, no teacher explaining the process. Just observation, curiosity and time. The wind brushes past you again, cooler now. You pull your arms closer to your body, instinctively seeking warmth, even though you know this is only imagination. Still the sensation lingers. It reminds you how exposed life must have been here. No insulated walls, no steady heat, just the elements always present. Some historians suggest that early humans developed these tools slowly over countless generations, each small improvement passed along not through writing, but through watching and copying. Others argue that bursts of innovation may have happened more quickly, sparked by necessity or sudden insight. The truth remains uncertain, hidden in the quiet gaps of time. As you continue walking, you notice the landscape stretching endlessly. There are patches of grass swaying gently, clusters of low shrubs, and beyond them a line of darker shapes that might be trees. The sky above feels enormous, a wide expanse of soft, fading light. There is something else you begin to sense. A kind of loneliness, but not quite the kind you might feel today. It is more like openness, the absence of constant human presence, no distant hum of traffic, no flicker of screens, just space. And yet you're not alone. Somewhere nearby, though you cannot see them yet, small groups of early humans move through this land. They do not build cities or even villages in the way we understand them. They travel, they adapt. They watch the world carefully because their survival depends on it. A lesser-known detail is that many of these early humans likely had a much deeper familiarity with their environment than we do today. They could recognize subtle changes in weather track animals by nearly invisible signs, and remember the locations of food sources across vast distances. It is a kind of knowledge that is rarely written down even now. You pause again, listening. The sound of wind shifts slightly, carrying with it a faint rustle. Perhaps grass bending under movement or the quiet steps of an animal passing through. Your senses feel sharper here. Or maybe the world is simply quieter, making it easier to notice everything. The temperature begins to drop as the light fades. Night approaches slowly, not with sudden darkness, but with a gradual softening of colours. The sky deepens and the first faint hints of stars begin to appear. You might think about how different night feels without artificial light. Today, even in quiet places, there is often a glow somewhere on the horizon. But here, darkness becomes complete. When the sun disappears, it truly disappears. And with that darkness comes both calm and uncertainty. Researchers continue to question exactly how early humans experienced night. Did they fear it deeply, or did they grow accustomed to its rhythms? Perhaps both. Without fire, darkness would have been limiting, even dangerous. But with it, something begins to change. Not far from where you stand, a faint glow begins to flicker. It is subtle at first, almost easy to miss. But as you turn toward it, you can see a small gathering of light against the growing darkness. Fire, one of the most important turning points in human history. You begin to move slowly toward it, careful with each step. The ground feels uneven, scattered with small stones and patches of dry grass. As you approach, the warmth becomes noticeable, spreading gently through the cool air. This is not just a source of heat, it is something more. A place where people gather, where food can be cooked, where light pushes back the darkness, where stories might begin to form, even if they are not yet spoken in the way we understand today. Historians widely agree that controlled use of fire began at least several 100,000 years ago, though the exact timing is still debated. Some evidence suggests it may have started even earlier. You stop at a distance, watching quietly. Shapes move around the fire, human but not quite like the people you see every day. Their movements are deliberate, their attention focused. The flames crackle softly, sending sparks upward into the darkening sky. The smell reaches you next, a mix of smoke and something faintly earthy. It is not unpleasant. In fact, it feels grounding, almost comforting. And in this moment you realize something simple and profound. Before cities, before writing, before recorded history, there were still moments like this. People gathered, shared warmth, watched the same sky. The world was different, but in some quiet way familiar too. You let yourself sit down on the cool ground just far enough to feel the warmth of the fire without being too close. The earth beneath you is firm, slightly rough, but steady. The flames flicker gently, and the sounds of the night settle into a soft rhythm. Wind, distant movement, the quiet crackle of burning wood. And as you sit there, you begin to feel the pace of this world. Slower, simpler, but not empty. Just waiting to be understood. You remain seated near the gentle glow of the fire, watching the flames shift and settle, rising and falling in quiet rhythm. The warmth lingers against your skin, easing the coolness of the night air. Around you, the figures near the fire move with calm intention, their gestures unhurried, their attention focused on simple, necessary tasks. After a while, you stand again, stretching slightly, and begin to walk away from the fire. Not too far, just enough to let the darkness surround you once more. The light fades behind you, becoming a soft flicker in the distance like a quiet heartbeat in the night. Ahead, the land stretches out beneath a sky now filled with stars. There are more stars than you have ever seen before. Without artificial light, the night sky reveals itself fully, a vast canopy of soft white points and faint glowing bands. You tilt your head upward for a moment, letting the stillness settle around you. Then slowly your attention returns to the ground. You notice something subtle, impressions in the earth. Shallow, irregular, but clearly not random. You step closer, crouching down again, your fingers hovering just above the surface. Footprints, faint but there. This is where the story becomes even quieter, even more delicate. Because these marks, these simple impressions in the ground, are some of the earliest traces of human presence, that we can still recognize today. One well-known fact is that some of the oldest preserved human footprints were discovered in places like Litoli in present-day Tanzania, dating back around 3.6 million years. These footprints were left in soft volcanic ash that later hardened, preserving a brief moment in time. A few individuals walked across that ground and somehow their steps remained. You trace one of the prints gently, not quite touching it, but following its outline with your eyes. The shape is familiar. A heel, a slight arch. The suggestion of toes. There is something deeply human about it, and you might find yourself wondering who were they? Where were they going? Were they alone or walking together in quiet company? Scholars remain divided on exactly what those ancient footprints tell us about behaviour. Some suggest they indicate social groups moving together, perhaps even a kind of early family structure. Others caution that a few prints cannot reveal so much. Still, the image is difficult to ignore. A small group crossing open land, leaving only these fleeting marks behind. You stand again and begin to follow the direction of the footprints. The ground here is uneven, with patches of softer soil that hold impressions more clearly. The air feels cooler now, carrying a faint scent of dry grass and distant earth. As you walk, you notice how the landscape gently shifts. Low hills rise and fall, and in the distance, darker shapes suggest clusters of trees or rocky outcrops. The world feels wide and open, but not empty. It holds quiet movement, subtle signs of life everywhere. Another lesser-known detail begins to take shape in your mind. Early human ancestors did not walk exactly like modern humans. Their gait may have been slightly different, their posture not quite the same, yet they were already walking upright, moving across the land on two legs. This ability, known as bipedalism, is one of the defining traits of human evolution. You try to match your steps to the prints, placing your feet carefully where theirs once landed. It feels strange at first, like stepping into a rhythm that is almost familiar, but not quite. Your stride adjusts slightly, your balance shifting in subtle ways, and for a moment you feel a quiet connection across time. The wind picks up, gently brushing against your face, carrying with it the soft rustling of grass. Somewhere nearby, a low call echoes again, deeper this time, perhaps from a larger animal moving through the darkness. You pause, listening. In this world, sound carries meaning. Every noise could signal something important. Early humans would have been constantly aware, their senses tuned to even the smallest changes. Today we often filter out background noise. The hum of machines' distant traffic, the soft buzz of electricity. But here there is no such buffer. Every sound stands on its own. You continue walking, following the faint trail of footprints as they lead toward a slightly lower stretch of land. The ground here feels softer underfoot, almost damp. You notice small patches where water may have collected earlier, leaving behind a darker tone in the soil. It is easy to imagine how these prints were preserved. A moment of movement followed by stillness, then time doing its slow work. Researchers continue to question how many such footprints have been lost forever. For every set that remains, there are countless others that faded, washed away by rain, erased by wind, or simply never preserved at all. What we see now is only a tiny fragment of a much larger story. You reach the end of the visible trail. The footprints become less distinct, blending into the natural patterns of the earth until they disappear completely. And just like that, the trace is gone. There is something quietly humbling about that. The realization that so much of human history has simply vanished, leaving behind only hints and fragments. You stand still for a moment, letting that thought settle. Then you turn slowly, looking back across the land you have just crossed. The faint glow of the fire is still visible in the distance, steady and warm against the darkness. It reminds you that even though individual traces may disappear, the presence of humans continues. You begin to walk back your steps, slower now, more deliberate. The ground feels slightly cooler, the night air settling more deeply around you. As you move, you notice other subtle signs. Small disturbances in the grass, faint tracks that might belong to animals, the gentle curve of the land shaped by time and weather. Everything here tells a story if you know how to look. And early humans did know how to look. Their survival depended on it. They would have read the land like a quiet language, noticing patterns that might seem invisible to us today. The direction of tracks, the condition of plants, the scent carried by the wind. You approach the fire once more, the warmth returning, gradually wrapping around you like a soft blanket. The figures gathered there remain calm, their movements steady and purposeful. One of them shifts slightly, adjusting a piece of wood in the fire. The flames respond with a soft crackle, rising briefly before settling again. You take a seat nearby, letting your body relax. And as you sit there, you reflect on what you have just seen. Not grand events, not dramatic moments, but something quieter. A few steps in the earth. A simple path across open land. Yet those steps carry meaning. They tell us that long before history was written, before cities were built, or stories recorded, humans were already moving through the world, leaving behind traces of their presence. Small, temporary, but real. The firelight flickers softly, casting gentle shadows that shift and stretch across the ground. The night continues around you, calm and steady. And somewhere beyond the reach of the light, the land holds countless other stories, waiting patiently hidden just beneath the surface. You sit quietly by the fire, letting its warmth settle into your hands and face, while the night stretches gently around you. The glow is steady now, no longer surprising, just present. It becomes part of the rhythm of this place, like the wind or the distant calls that rise and fall in the darkness. After a while, your attention drifts to something near the edge of the firelight. A small object rests on the ground, half hidden by shadow. You lean forward slightly, brushing aside a few bits of dry grass. It is a stone. At first it looks ordinary, rough, uneven, shaped by time and the slow pressure of the earth. But as you pick it up, turning it carefully in your hand, you begin to notice something different. One side has been chipped away. Not randomly, but with intention. The edge is sharper. This is not just a stone, it is a tool. You hold it up, letting the firelight reveal its surface. Tiny fractures catch the light, showing where pieces were struck off one after another. Each strike would have required precision, even if the person making it did not think of it that way. They simply knew what worked. One widely accepted fact is that early humans, particularly species like Homo habilis, are associated with some of the earliest known stone tool industries, often called older one tools. These tools are simple by modern standards, but they represent a major shift. For the first time, objects in the environment were deliberately shaped to serve a purpose. You turn the stone slowly in your hand, feeling its weight. It fits naturally in your palm, almost as if it was meant to be held this way. And you might find yourself wondering how long it took for someone to learn this. How many attempts, how many broken stones before they understood how to create a usable edge. Some historians suggest that toolmaking began as a gradual process learned through observation and repetition over many generations. Others propose that early humans may have had moments of sudden insight where the connection between action and result became clear. The truth is still uncertain, resting somewhere between slow learning and quiet discovery. You look back toward the fire. One of the figures nearby is working with another stone, striking it carefully against a larger rock. Each impact produces a soft, dull sound, not loud, but distinct enough to carry through the still air. You watch closely. The movements are controlled but not rushed. There is no sense of urgency, only focus. The person pauses between strikes, adjusting the angle slightly, then continues. A small fragment breaks away, falling to the ground with a faint tap. It is a simple act, and yet it changes everything. A lesser-known detail is that even these early tools were not all the same. Different shapes and sizes served different purposes. Some were used for cutting meat, others for scraping hides, and some perhaps for breaking open bones to access the nutrient-rich marrow inside. You imagine how valuable such a tool would be. Without it, many tasks would be far more difficult or even impossible. With it, new possibilities begin to open. You place the stone back down, gently, careful not to disturb the arrangement too much. It feels important in a quiet way to leave things as they are. The fire crackles softly beside you, sending a brief shower of sparks upward. They rise for a moment, glowing faintly, then disappear into the darkness above. You lean back slightly, resting your hands on the cool ground behind you. The earth feels firm and steady, a contrast to the shifting light of the fire. Your thoughts drift again, this time to the idea of intention. Before tools, early humans interacted with the world as it was. They gathered, they hunted, they moved. But with tools, something changes. The environment is no longer just something to respond to. It becomes something that can be shaped, even if only in small ways. Researchers continue to question how this shift affected the development of the human mind. Did tool-making encourage new ways of thinking? Did it strengthen memory planning or cooperation? There is no single answer, but many believe it played a key role in shaping human cognition. You glance again at the figure working with the stone. The rhythm continues: strike, pause, adjust, strike again. It is almost meditative. The night air grows slightly cooler and you pull your arms closer to your body. The fire remains warm, but the surrounding darkness carries a chill that slowly seeps in. You notice another detail now. Scattered around the fire are small pieces of stone fragments from earlier work. Some are sharp, others dull. They form a quiet record of activity, a trail of effort that tells its own story. In modern times, we often think of tools as finished products, something we buy or use without much thought. But here the process is visible. Every tool carries the memory of its creation. You reach down and pick up one of the smaller fragments. It is thinner, lighter, but still sharp along one edge. You run your thumb carefully along it, feeling the slight resistance. Even this small piece could be useful. That is another subtle aspect of early tool use. Nothing is wasted if it can still serve a purpose. Efficiency is not a concept here, but a necessity. You set the fragment back down and shift your position, turning slightly to face the open landscape beyond the fire. The stars remain bright overhead, steady and silent. For a moment you imagine how different this world feels compared to today. There are no manufactured objects, no plastics, no metals shaped in factories. Everything comes directly from the natural world. Stone, wood, bone. Materials shaped by hand, one piece at a time. And yet there is a quiet sophistication in this simplicity. You watch as another figure reaches for a completed tool, lifting it, briefly testing its edge with a careful touch. There is no visible reaction, no expression of pride or satisfaction, but the action itself suggests recognition. This is useful. This works. You might think about how this knowledge is shared. Without written language, without formal teaching, everything must be passed on through demonstration and imitation. Someone watches, learns, tries, fails, and tries again. Over time, skill develops. Scholars remain divided on how structured this learning process was. Some believe early humans may have had informal teaching methods, guiding younger members through repeated practice. Others argue that much of the learning was observational without direct instruction. Either way, the result is clear: knowledge persists. The fire continues to burn steadily, its light casting soft patterns across the ground. The tools, the fragments, the quiet movements of the people around you all blend into a single continuous scene. You feel yourself relaxing more deeply now, the steady rhythm of the environment settling into your thoughts. And as you sit there surrounded by the earliest signs of human ingenuity, you begin to understand something simple. Before grand inventions, before cities and machines, there were these small moments. A hand shaping stone, a mind recognizing possibility, a quiet beginning almost unnoticed, yet carrying the weight of everything that would come after. You remain seated near the fire, your eyes following the soft movement of the flames as they rise and settle again. The warmth has become familiar now, something your body quietly depends on. It wraps around you in gentle waves, easing the cool air that presses in from the edges of the night. For a while nothing changes, and that stillness feels important. Then you notice a small shift. One of the figures leans forward and places another piece of wood into the fire. The flames respond slowly at first, then with a soft crackle growing slightly brighter. A few sparks drift upward, glowing for a moment before fading into the darkness above. You watch closely, realizing that this is not just a natural fire left to burn on its own. It is being maintained, fed, watched. This is control. Evidence suggests that the ability to manage fire marked one of the most significant turning points in early human life. While natural fires caused by lightning or volcanic activity existed, long before learning to keep fire alive and use it consistently changed everything. It provided warmth, protection, and eventually new ways to prepare food. You shift a little closer, extending your hands toward the heat. The sensation is immediate and comforting. Without thinking, you adjust your position so that one side of your body warms while the other remains cool. It is such a simple act, but it carries meaning. You're responding to the fire just as early humans would have done. Nearby, another figure sits slightly apart, holding a long branch. The tip is darkened, perhaps from earlier contact with the flames. Slowly, carefully, they place it into the fire, then lift it again. The end now glows faintly a soft orange against the night. For a moment they hold it, still watching it. What often goes unnoticed is how delicate this process must have been. Fire is not something you can rush. It requires attention, patience, and an understanding of how different materials burn. Too little fuel, and it fades. Too much too quickly, and it smothers. You begin to see how this would have required a kind of quiet skill passed from one person to another, learned through careful observation. There is also another layer to this. Fire does more than provide warmth. It changes the rhythm of life. Without it, darkness would limit activity. Once the sun sets, movement becomes more dangerous, more uncertain. But with fire, the night becomes something different. Not fully safe, perhaps, but less restrictive. You glance out into the darkness beyond the firelight. The shadows feel softer now, less absolute. The boundary between light and dark is still there, but it no longer feels as final. A faint sound drifts in from the distance, a low drawn-out call followed by silence. You pause, listening. In this world, fire also serves as protection. Many animals are cautious of it, keeping their distance from the light and heat. It creates a small zone of safety in an otherwise unpredictable environment. Some interpretations suggest that the regular use of fire may have influenced where early humans chose to rest or gather. Areas that allowed for controlled fires would have become more favourable, shaping patterns of movement and temporary settlement. You shift your gaze back to the flames. Their movement is almost hypnotic, rising and folding in on themselves, never quite still but never chaotic either. There is a smell now slightly stronger than before, a mix of smoke and something cooking. You notice one of the figures holding a piece of food, turning it slowly near the fire. This is another quiet transformation. Cooking. Archaeological findings indicate that cooking food likely began hundreds of thousands of years ago, though the exact timing is still being studied. Heat changes the structure of food, making it easier to chew and digest. It can also make certain nutrients more accessible. You imagine what that would mean in this world. Food that requires less effort to consume. Energy gained more efficiently. Over time, these small changes could have lasting effects. Interestingly, some researchers have proposed that cooking may have played a role in the development of the human brain. With easier access to calories, the body could support more energy-intensive processes. It is a subtle connection, but one that continues to be explored. You watch as the figure brings the food closer, examining it briefly before taking a bite. The movement is calm, unhurried. There is no rush here, no sense of time pressing forward. You might find yourself thinking about how different this feels from modern meals. Today eating can be quick, distracted, almost automatic. But here it is deliberate. Each step from finding food to preparing it requires attention. The fire crackles softly again, a steady sound that blends into the background of the night. You adjust your position, sitting more comfortably now, your body relaxed, your breathing slower. Another small detail catches your attention. The light from the fire reflects in the eyes of those nearby, creating brief glimmers as they move. It is a subtle effect, but it gives a sense of connection. Everyone gathered here shares the same source of light, the same warmth. There is something quietly unifying about that. Not everyone agrees on how early humans first learned to control fire. Some believe it was a gradual process, beginning with the use of naturally occurring fires and slowly developing into the ability to maintain them. Others suggest there may have been key moments of discovery where understanding shifted more quickly. What remains clear is that once fire became part of daily life, it changed the human experience in lasting ways. You lean forward slightly, placing a small piece of wood near the edge of the fire, just as you've seen others do. It catches slowly, the flames spreading along its surface in a thin, glowing line. For a moment, you feel part of the process, not as an observer, but as a participant. The night continues to settle around you. The air cools further, but the fire holds steady, a constant presence against the darkness. You glance once more at the open land beyond, now mostly hidden in shadow. It feels distant, almost separate from this small circle of light. And perhaps that is the most important thing to understand. Fire creates a centre, a place to gather, a place to pause, a place where the vastness of the world feels just a little more contained. You let your eyes rest on the flames again, their gentle movement drawing your thoughts into a slower rhythm. And as you sit there warmed by one of the earliest human discoveries, you begin to feel how this single element quietly reshaped everything that came after. You sit quietly for a while longer, letting the fire's warmth settle into your bones, until eventually the stillness invites you to move again. Slowly you rise, brushing a bit of dust from your hands. The ground feels firm beneath your feet, cool now that you have stepped away from the glow. The figures near the fire remain where they are, their silhouettes steady and calm. You leave them behind, walking gently into the open land once more. The night has softened into a deep, quiet blue, and the stars continue their silent watch above. As your eyes adjust, the landscape begins to take shape again. Low grasses ripple faintly in the breeze. The earth stretches wide and uninterrupted, with only occasional clusters of trees breaking the horizon. This is the kind of world early humans often lived in. Open plains, shifting environments, and long distances between reliable sources of food and water. Evidence from fossil sites and ancient remains shows that many early human groups lived as nomadic hunter-gatherers. They did not stay in one place for long. Instead, they moved across the land, following the rhythms of animals, plants, and seasons. You walk forward slowly, imagining what it would feel like to live this way. No permanent home, no fixed destination, just a constant awareness of where resources might be found next. The air carries a faint scent of dry grass and something else, something earthy and distant. You pause, breathing it in. It is subtle, but it hints at life moving somewhere beyond your view. You continue on your steps, soft against the ground. Before long, you begin to notice movement ahead. At first, it is just a shifting of shapes barely visible against the darkness. Then gradually it becomes clearer. A small group of humans. They are moving together, spaced closely but not tightly. Each step is measured, deliberate. There is no wasted motion. They seem to flow across the land as if they belong to it. You slow your pace, keeping a respectful distance, watching quietly. One individual carries something in their hands, perhaps gathered food or a simple tool. Another glances toward the horizon, scanning the distance with steady attention. This is daily life here. Not dramatic, not rushed, but constant. A well-supported understanding is that early human survival depended heavily on cooperation. Hunting large animals, gathering enough food, and protecting one another required shared effort. No one could manage alone for long. You notice how the group moves with an unspoken coordination. There are no visible signals, no clear commands, yet their actions remain connected. When one slows, others adjust. When one looks outward, others follow. It is a quiet form of communication built on familiarity and trust. You begin to follow them at a distance, your steps matching their pace. The ground changes slightly beneath you, becoming more uneven. Small dips and rises create subtle variations in movement. You adjust naturally, just as they do. Over time, the group approaches a patch of land where the grass grows thicker and slightly greener. One of them kneels, reaching down to examine something near the base of a plant. You move a little closer, curious. They pull gently at the plant, lifting something from the soil. A root long and arrow-coated in dirt. It is wiped quickly against the ground, then examined. This is gathering. What often goes unnoticed is how essential plant foods were to early human diets. While hunting often captures attention, gathering provided a steady and reliable source of nutrition. Roots, berries, seeds, and leaves all played important roles. The individual places the root into a simple bundle and continues searching. Others nearby begin doing the same, spreading out slightly but staying within view of one another. You crouch down, touching the ground again. The soil here feels softer, slightly moist. It makes sense that plants would grow more easily in a place like this. You imagine how knowledge of these areas would be passed along. Certain locations remembered revisited when conditions were right. Some interpretations suggest that early humans developed detailed mental maps of their environments, not maps drawn on paper, but stored in memory. Paths, landmarks, seasonal patterns, all held within the mind. You stand again watching as the group continues their work. One of them pauses, looking up suddenly. Their body becomes still alert. The others notice almost immediately their movements slowing. You follow their gaze. In the distance, faint but distinct, a group of animals moves across the plain. Their shapes are large, their steps steady. You cannot see every detail, but you can sense their presence. Food. The group does not rush. Instead, they observe. The distance, the direction, the number of animals. Every detail matters. You feel your own body grow still, you're breathing quieter. This is another side of life here, patience. Not every opportunity is taken. Timing is important. Risk must be considered. You might think about how different this is from modern life, where decisions are often made quickly sometimes without much thought. Here every choice carries weight. The group eventually begins to move again, but not toward the animals. Instead, they shift direction slightly, continuing their steady pace across the land. Perhaps the animals are too far. Perhaps the risk is too great. Or perhaps there is simply enough food already. Not everyone agrees on how early humans balanced hunting and gathering. Some perspectives suggest hunting played a central role, while others emphasize the importance of plant-based foods. It likely varied depending on the environment and available resources. You continue following your steps, now more relaxed. The sky begins to lighten slightly at the edge of the horizon. Not fully bright, but hinting at the approach of dawn. The stars fade just a little, their sharpness softening. The air feels cooler, still carrying the quiet promise of a new day. The group slows again, this time near a cluster of low trees. Some begin to settle, lowering themselves to the ground. Others remain standing, watching the surroundings. This may be a temporary rest. There are no permanent structures here, no fixed places of return. Just moments of pause within constant movement. A small but fascinating detail is that early human groups were often quite small, perhaps only a few dozen individuals at most. This allowed them to move more easily and adapt quickly to changing conditions. You find a place to sit nearby, not too close, just within sight. The ground feels slightly warmer here, perhaps, from the shelter of the trees. You lean back, letting your body relax once more. The sounds of the world begin to shift as dawn approaches. A faint rustle in the leaves, a distant call that feels different from those of the night. The rhythm continues. And as you sit there watching this quiet group prepare for another day of movement and survival, you begin to understand something simple. Life here is not defined by large events. It is shaped by small, steady actions. Walking, gathering, watching, waiting. A continuous flow guided by the land itself. You remain seated near the cluster of low trees, your back resting lightly against the rough surface of a trunk. The bark presses gently through your clothing, uneven but grounding. Around you, the group has settled into a quiet pause, their movements slower, now shaped by the fading night and the first hints of morning. The sky shifts gradually, the deep blue softening into pale grey. A faint line of light stretches along the horizon, not yet bright, but enough to change the feeling of the world. The stars fade one by one, retreating without ceremony. You listen. The sounds are different now. The night carried distant calls and long silences. Morning brings something softer closer. Small rustles in the grass, the faint flutter of wings, the gentle stir of life waking up. One of the group rises slowly, stretching their arms and shoulders. Another follows, then another. There is no signal, no clear beginning, yet everyone seems to understand that it is time to move again. Before they do, something else catches your attention. Two individuals face each other, standing close. One raises their hand slightly, making a short, subtle motion. The other responds with a small nod and a shift in posture. No words are spoken, at least none that you can hear or recognize, and yet something has clearly been communicated. This is the language before language. Researchers have long studied how early humans communicated before the development of structured speech. While modern language is complex and highly organized, early forms of communication were likely more fluid. Gestures, facial expressions, body movement, and simple vocal sounds would have carried meaning. You watch carefully. Another pair interacts nearby. One points briefly toward the open land, then lowers their hand. The other glances in that direction, then begins to gather a few items from the ground. It is quiet but not silent. A soft sound escapes from one of them. Not quite a word, more like a tone. It rises slightly, then falls. The others seem to understand, adjusting their actions without hesitation. Evidence from studies of early human anatomy suggests that the capacity for speech developed gradually. The structure of the throat and vocal tract in early species was different from that of modern humans, which may have limited the range of sounds they could produce. Still, communication was clearly happening. You begin to notice patterns. A raised hand might signal attention. A shift in stance might indicate direction. A sound repeated in similar situations may begin to carry consistent meaning. It is not language as you know it, but it is not random either. You stand slowly, brushing your hands against your sides. The ground beneath you feels slightly warmer now, touched by the first traces of sunlight. The group begins to move again, and you follow at a distance, your steps quiet. As they walk, communication continues in these small, subtle ways. A glance shared between two individuals, a brief pause that others immediately recognize, a soft call that draws attention without urgency. What often goes unnoticed is how much information can be conveyed without words. Even today, much of human communication relies on tone, expression, and gesture. In this earlier time, those elements would have carried even greater importance. You try to imagine what it would feel like to live this way, to understand others not through sentences but through shared experience and observation. It might feel limiting at first, but then again it might feel simpler. There is no need for long explanations, no confusion caused by complex phrasing. Meaning is direct, immediate, tied closely to the moment. You step over a small patch of uneven ground, adjusting your balance as you move. The group ahead does the same, their movements fluid and practiced. A faint breeze passes through, carrying the scent of damp earth and fresh grass. The air feels cooler near the ground, warmer as the light begins to grow. You notice a child among the group, now smaller in size, moving with shorter steps but keeping pace. They watch everything closely, their gaze shifting from one adult to another, absorbing each movement. From time to time, the child mimics a gesture. A hand raised, a head turned, a small sound repeated. Learning begins here, not through formal teaching, but through observation and imitation. Some researchers suggest that this kind of social learning played a crucial role in the development of human intelligence. By watching and copying others, individuals could acquire skills without having to discover everything on their own. You slow your pace slightly, allowing yourself to focus on these interactions. One adult pauses, kneeling briefly to adjust something on the ground. The child watches, then crouches as well, attempting a similar motion. It is not perfect, but the effort is there. No correction is given, at least not in a way you can clearly see. The learning is quiet, gradual. Another soft sound passes through the group, slightly different from the ones you heard earlier. It seems to carry a sense of direction, drawing attention forward. You follow their gaze. The land ahead opens into a broader stretch, the grass lower, the ground more visible. Movement is easier here, but exposure is greater as well. You feel the shift immediately. This is a place where awareness becomes even more important. The group adjusts their spacing slightly, not clustering too closely, but not spreading too far apart either. It is a balance maintained without discussion. Not everyone agrees on how complex early communication systems were. Some perspectives suggest that structured language developed relatively late, while others propose that the foundations of language may have appeared much earlier in simpler forms. What seems certain is that communication in some form has always been essential. You continue walking your senses tuned to the subtle cues around you. The light grows stronger now, casting soft shadows across the ground. The colours of the landscape begin to return muted at first, then gradually clearer. You notice how the expressions on the faces of those ahead become easier to read. Small changes in the eyes, the set of the mouth, the tilt of the head. Each detail carries meaning. You might think about how much of this still exists today. Even with all our words, we still rely on these quiet signals. A glance, a gesture, a shift in tone. In this earlier world, those signals are everything. The group slows again, approaching another patch of land where the grass thickens slightly. One individual raises a hand and the others stop almost immediately. You stop as well. There is a pause, a moment of shared attention. Then slowly movement resumes, but more carefully this time. Whatever was noticed, it has changed their behaviour. You may not know exactly what it is, but the communication has done its work. You feel yourself settling into this rhythm, this quieter way of understanding. No long conversations, no written messages, just presence, awareness and connection. And as you walk alongside these early humans guided by gestures and soft sounds, you begin to sense how the roots of language are already here, forming gently shaped by necessity and shared experience. You continue walking with the group as the light of morning slowly spreads across the land. The sky grows softer, shifting from pale grey into faint shades of gold. The air feels crisp against your skin, cool but no longer cold. Each breath carries the clean scent of open earth and distant vegetation. The ground beneath your feet becomes firmer as you move forward, the soil packed down by time and weather. The grass thins in places, revealing patches of bare earth and scattered stones. The world feels wide and exposed here, with fewer places to hide and more distance between natural shelter. The group ahead moves steadily, their pace unbroken. There's a quiet determination in the way they walk, as if each step is part of a pattern repeated countless times before. As the sun begins to rise, the landscape reveals more of its shape. Low hills stretch out in the distance, and beyond them something different begins to appear, a faint white brightness along the horizon. At first it looks like mist or perhaps a trick of the light, but as you continue forward it becomes clearer. Ice, a vast distant expanse of it. You slow your pace slightly, taking in the sight. It feels almost unreal, a pale boundary separating land from something colder, something more still. This is a glimpse into the Ice Age. During long stretches of early human history, large parts of the Earth were covered in ice. Massive glaciers spread across continents, shaping the land in slow, powerful ways. These periods were not constant, but they lasted for thousands of years at a time, altering climates and forcing both animals and humans to adapt. You pull your arms closer to your body again, even though the sun is rising. The idea of that cold stretching endlessly across the land brings with it a quiet sense of unease. The group continues moving, but you notice a slight shift in their behaviour. Their spacing tightens just a little. Their movements become more deliberate. Life in colder environments requires different strategies. You glance down at the ground and notice something new. Small patches of frost cling to the edges of shaded areas, delicate and thin, disappearing slowly as the light reaches them. Your breath becomes faintly visible just for a moment before fading into the air. You might find yourself wondering how early humans managed to survive in conditions like this without the comforts we rely on today. There were no insulated homes, no heating systems, no layered synthetic clothing. Only what could be gathered, made or adapted from the natural world. By this stage in human development, people were already using animal hides to protect themselves from the cold. These coverings would have been simple, perhaps draped over the body or tied loosely, but they made a crucial difference. You notice now that several members of the group wear such coverings. Rough, uneven, but effective. The material shifts as they move, catching the light in soft, muted tones. A small detail becomes clear. These coverings are not identical. Each one is slightly different in size, shape and texture. That suggests they were made individually shaped by hand, adjusted as needed. You continue walking your steps, steady your attention moving between the ground and the distant ice. The wind begins to pick up slightly, carrying a colder edge now. It brushes against your face sharper than before, and you instinctively lower your head just a bit. The group reacts as well. Their posture changes subtly, their movements angled slightly against the wind. There is no complaint, no visible discomfort, just adjustment. This is a world where adaptation is constant. Something easily overlooked is how much awareness early humans would have had of seasonal changes. Not just the obvious shifts in temperature, but the smaller signals. The way the wind feels the behavior of animals, the growth patterns of plants. All of these clues would guide decisions, when to move, where to go, what to expect. You notice one individual pause, kneeling briefly to touch the ground. Their hand lingers there for a moment, then they stand again, continuing forward. It is a simple action, but it suggests attention to detail. The condition of the ground might reveal moisture temperature or even recent movement. Far above, a bird crosses the sky, its shape small against the growing light. Its call is brief, sharp, then gone. The world feels alive in a quiet, restrained way. The group begins to angle slightly away from the distant ice, moving instead toward a line of darker land where low vegetation appears thicker. It makes sense. Closer to ice conditions would be harsher, food sources more limited, shelter harder to find. The decision to move in this direction likely comes from experience from memory built over time. It is difficult to say exactly how early humans understood these large environmental patterns. There were no maps, no recorded knowledge passed through writing, and yet generation after generation people learned how to survive in shifting climates. Some findings suggest that groups adapted by moving seasonally, returning to familiar areas when conditions improved. Others may have continued forward, exploring new regions as they became accessible. You follow the group as they approach the darker stretch of land. The ground here feels slightly softer again, the grass thicker, the air just a bit less harsh. The change is subtle but noticeable. One of the group members slows, scanning the area ahead. Another turns, slightly checking the space behind. There is a constant awareness here, a balance between moving forward and staying alert. You take a moment to look back. The distant ice remains visible, pale and quiet against the horizon. It feels far away, but its presence shapes everything. The climate, the movement of animals, the choices of people. You turn forward again, focusing on the path ahead. The group begins to spread out slightly as they enter the thicker vegetation. Each person moving with quiet intention, searching, observing. The wind softens here, filtered through the plants. The air feels calmer, less exposed. You slow your pace, letting yourself fully take in the surroundings. The texture of the ground beneath your feet, the faint rustle of leaves brushing together, the gentle warmth of sunlight beginning to settle on your skin, and beneath it all the steady rhythm of survival, walking, observing, adjusting, a continuous response to a world that is always changing. You breathe in deeply, the air cool but fresh, and allow yourself to settle into this moment, a moment shaped by ice, by movement, by quiet resilience. And as you continue forward with the group, you begin to understand how deeply connected early human life was to the shifting patterns of the earth itself. You move quietly through the thicker stretch of vegetation, your steps softer now, as the ground becomes layered with leaves and low growth. The air feels slightly warmer here, sheltered from the open wind that swept across the plains behind you. Sunlight filters through scattered branches, falling in gentle patches across the earth. The group ahead has slowed, not stopped but changed. Their movements carry a different kind of focus now. Less wandering, more intention. You notice how their posture shifts, their heads angled forward, eyes fixed on something beyond your immediate view. You follow their line of sight. At first you see nothing unusual, just open ground beyond the edge of the vegetation. Then slowly shapes begin to emerge. Large ones, moving. A herd. They're grazing quietly, their bodies steady, their movements calm. The distance between your group and the animals is not too great, but not close either. Close enough to see, far enough to remain unnoticed. You feel your own breathing slow, instinctively matching the stillness around you. The group lowers themselves slightly, some crouching, others remaining half bent. There is no rush, no sudden movement. This is the beginning of a hunt. You might expect noise or urgency, but there is none. Everything happens in silence, guided by shared awareness. A glance, a shift of weight, a small gesture of the hand. That is enough. Long before organized hunting tools existed, early, humans relied on cooperation and strategy to approach animals. They observed patterns, understood movement, and worked together to increase their chances of success. You notice how the group begins to spread out slowly and carefully. Not too far apart, but enough to create a wider presence. Each person moves in a slightly different direction, forming a loose arc. It is subtle, but deliberate. You remain where you are watching. The animals continue grazing unaware for now. Their heads lower and rise, their ears flicking occasionally. A breeze passes through, carrying scents in both directions. The wind matters. You see one individual pause, turning slightly to feel its direction. Then they adjust their position, moving to remain downwind. It is a small detail, but an important one. If the animals catch the scent of humans, the moment will be lost. This kind of awareness comes from experience. From many attempts, some successful, many not. It's not always easy to determine how early hunting strategies developed. Some evidence points to simple scavenging at first, where humans took advantage of animals already dead or weakened. Over time, more active hunting likely became possible, especially as coordination improved. You watch as one of the group members picks up a long branch, holding it firmly. It's not finely shaped, but it serves a purpose. Others carry similar objects. These are early weapons, simple extensions of the body. Something you might not expect is how much patience this requires. Hunting is not constant action. It is often waiting, watching, choosing the right moment. The group inches closer. Each step is slow measured. The ground is uneven, scattered with small obstacles that must be navigated without sound. A misplaced step could snap a branch, rustle leaves, too loudly draw attention. You feel your own body becoming still, as if even your presence must remain quiet. One of the animals lifts its head suddenly. Everything stops. The group freezes in place. No movement at all, not even a shift of weight. The animal looks around, ears alert, body tense for a brief moment. Then slowly it lowers its head again, returning to its grazing. The tension eases, but only slightly. This moment could have changed everything. You notice how the group does not rush to make up for lost time. They simply continue maintaining the same careful pace. There is a rhythm to this. Approach, pause, observe, adjust. The arc tightens. Now the animals are closer, their shapes more defined. You can see the movement of muscles beneath their skin, the steady rise and fall of their breathing. The group reaches a point where the distance is small enough to act. A subtle signal passes between them. A slight movement, almost invisible. Then suddenly motion, not chaotic but controlled. Several individuals move forward at once, guiding the animals in a particular direction. Others shift to block escape paths, creating pressure without direct confrontation. The herd reacts. Heads lift, bodies turn, a movement begins. There is a brief burst of energy, but even this is not wild or frantic. It is directed. The goal is not always to overpower, but to influence movement. To separate one animal from the group, to create an opportunity. You watch as one animal breaks slightly from the others, its path shifting just enough to isolate it. The group responds, immediately adjusting their positions. It is not guaranteed. It never is. Sometimes the animals escape, sometimes the effort fails, but each attempt builds knowledge. Some interpretations suggest that early hunting was as much about persistence as it was about strength. Following tracking, wearing down an animal over time rather than relying on a single moment of capture. The movement continues for a short while, then begins to slow. The herd moves away, the opportunity passing. The group stops. There is no visible frustration, no dramatic reaction, just stillness. This is part of it too. Not every hunt succeeds, and yet even in this moment something has been gained. Experience, understanding, a deeper familiarity with the land and the animals that move through it. You feel your own body relax slightly as the tension fades. The group begins to gather again, closing the distance between them. Their movements return to a calmer pace. One individual lowers themselves to the ground, briefly examining a track left behind. Others glance around, taking in the surroundings. The hunt may be over for now, but the awareness continues. You step forward, slowly following as they begin to move once more, leaving the open area behind. The air feels quieter, again the urgency replaced by steady motion. You might think about how different this is from modern expectations of success and failure. Here there is no clear endpoint, no final outcome that defines everything. There is only continuation. The group moves on, adapting, adjusting, carrying forward what they have learned. And as you walk with them, you begin to understand that survival here is not built on single moments of triumph, but on countless small efforts repeated again and again across time. You follow the group as they leave the open stretch behind, stepping once more into an area where the land feels softer and more varied. The ground dips gently, forming shallow pockets where moisture lingers. Plants grow thicker here, their leaves broader, their roots hidden beneath the surface. The pace has changed again. The tension from the hunt has faded, replaced by something quieter. A different kind of focus. Less urgency, more attention to detail. One of the group kneels, brushing aside a layer of leaves. Their fingers move carefully through the soil, not digging randomly but searching with purpose. After a moment they uncover something small and pale beneath the dirt. A root. They lift it slowly, shaking off the soil, then holding it up briefly before placing it into a bundle carried at their side. Others nearby begin doing the same. You move a little closer, watching. This is gathering, the quieter half of survival that often goes unnoticed. While hunting carries moments of action, gathering is steady, continuous, and just as important. Across many prehistoric environments, plant foods made up a significant portion of daily intake. Seeds, fruits, nuts, and underground roots offered reliable nourishment when animals were scarce or difficult to catch. You crouch down, pressing your hand gently into the soil. It feels cool and slightly damp, softer than the dry ground you crossed earlier. The scent here is richer too, earthy and alive. You begin to notice patterns. Certain plants cluster together, others grow in more scattered patches. Some areas seem more productive than others, though it is not immediately obvious why. The group moves through this space with quiet familiarity. They do not stop at every plant. They select carefully, passing over some, focusing on others. This suggests knowledge, not just of where to find food, but of what is worth taking. A small detail becomes clear as you watch more closely. One individual examines a plant, then leaves it untouched. Another nearby chooses a similar one and harvests it. There must be differences that are not immediately visible to you. It reminds you that this kind of understanding is built over time, through experience, observation, and perhaps even trial and error. You pick up a small piece of plant matter from the ground, turning it between your fingers. It feels dry, fibrous, not something you would instinctively eat. And yet here people know what to look for. Some discoveries from ancient plant remains suggest that early humans consumed a surprisingly wide variety of plant foods, including some that require preparation to be edible. This indicates not just knowledge, but also a willingness to experiment. You stand again, brushing your hands together, and continue following the group as they move slowly through the area. The sun has risen higher now, casting a gentle warmth across the land. The light filters through leaves, creating soft patterns that shift as the breeze moves. A faint buzzing sound drifts past your ear. An insect small and quick, disappearing just as suddenly as it appeared. Life here exists in layers large and small, all moving together in quiet balance. One of the group pauses near a low bush reaching toward its branches. Small round shapes hang there, dark in colour. Berries. They pick a few, examining them briefly before placing them into their bundle. You notice that they do not take everything, only some. This is another subtle detail. Taking too much could reduce what is available later. Even if this idea is not spoken, the behaviour reflects a kind of balance with the environment. It is not always clear how conscious this balance was. Some perspectives suggest that early humans simply moved often enough that resources had time to recover. Others propose that there may have been an intuitive sense of limits. Either way, the result is the same. The land continues to provide. You walk a little further, noticing how the ground slopes slightly downward. A faint line of moisture marks the path of what may once have been a small stream. Near it, the plants grow thicker still. Several members of the group gather here, their movements more concentrated. One uses a simple tool to loosen the soil, making it easier to pull up roots without breaking them. This small action makes a difference. It reduces effort, increases success. You might not expect such efficiency in a time so early, but it begins to appear in subtle ways. A simple tool used in the right moment. A known location revisited. A technique passed from one person to another. These are the building blocks of something larger. You kneel again, this time watching more closely as one individual works. Their hands move with practiced ease, clearing soil, lifting the root, brushing it clean. There is no hesitation. This is not their first time. You glance around at the others. Some are still gathering. Others are watching, perhaps resting briefly before continuing. The group remains connected even as they spread out slightly. A soft sound passes between two individuals, a short tone followed by a glance. The other responds with a small movement, shifting closer. Communication continues quiet and constant. The air grows warmer as the morning advances. You can feel it now on your skin, gentle but steady. The scent of plants becomes more noticeable too, fresh, slightly sweet mixed with the deeper smell of soil. You take a slow breath, letting it settle. This part of life feels less intense than the hunt, but no less important. It is steady work repeated day after day, and in many ways it provides stability. Some researchers believe that gathering may have played a central role in shaping early human societies. It required knowledge, memory, and cooperation. It also offered a more predictable source of food compared to hunting. You watch as one individual finishes filling their bundle, tying it loosely with a strip of plant fiber. They stand, stretching slightly, then look around at the others. Gradually, the group begins to come together again. The gathering's ending, at least for now. You rise as well, your movements slower, more relaxed. The land behind you holds traces of what has been done. Disturbed soil, broken stems, faint impressions of feet. Nothing dramatic, nothing permanent. Just signs of presence. The group begins to move once more, leaving the fertile patch behind. You follow, stepping carefully, your mind still lingering on the quiet rhythm of gathering. And as you walk, you begin to understand that survival here is not just about strength or speed. It is about knowing where to look. You walk with the group as they leave the fertile patch behind the ground, gradually becoming firmer again beneath your feet. The plants thin out and the air feels a little drier. The sun has risen higher now, its warmth steady but not overwhelming, resting gently on your shoulders. The group moves with quiet purpose, not hurried but not wandering either. There's a sense that they're heading somewhere familiar. After some time, the land begins to change again. Low-rises appear ahead, dotted with larger rocks and scattered branches. The terrain feels slightly uneven, offering small pockets of shade and protection from the wind. It is not a dramatic shift, but enough to make the space feel different from the open plains you crossed earlier. As you approach, you notice something else, shapes that do not quite belong to the natural pattern. At first they are difficult to distinguish, just a slight irregularity among the rocks and branches, but as you move closer they become clearer. Simple shelters, not permanent structures, not walls or buildings, but arrangements of materials placed with intention. Branches leaning together, forming a loose frame. Piles of leaves gathered in certain areas. Stones positioned to block the wind. You slow your pace, taking it in. This is a place of rest. Long before villages or houses, people created temporary shelters like these to protect themselves from the elements. They were not meant to last forever, just long enough. You step closer to one of the structures, careful not to disturb it. The branches are rough, some still holding bits of bark. They are arranged in a way that creates a small enclosed space open on one side. You crouch slightly and look inside. The ground within is covered with a layer of leaves and softer plant material. It feels intentional, a way to create a more comfortable surface. You reach down and press your hand lightly against it. It gives slightly beneath your touch. Even here comfort matters. You might not expect it, but early humans paid attention to where and how they rested. A simple layer of leaves could make the difference between a cold, hard surface and something softer, more insulating. Nearby others in the group begin to settle in. Some sit, others lie down, their movements slow and unhurried. One adjusts a branch, shifting it slightly to improve the shape of the shelter. It is a quiet kind of construction. Nothing is measured, nothing is drawn, everything is adjusted by feel, by experience. You step back and look around. There are several of these shelters, not identical but similar enough to suggest a shared idea. Each one shaped by hand, each one serving the same purpose. Protection. From wind, from rain, from the cold of night. You find a spot near one of them and sit down, letting your body relax again. The ground here feels different, slightly cushioned by the materials beneath it. The shade offers a gentle break from the growing warmth of the sun. You lean back, resting your shoulders against a low branch. It presses lightly into your back, not entirely comfortable, but not unpleasant either. This is not luxury, but it is enough. The group around you settles into a quiet rhythm. Some rest with their eyes closed. Others remain awake, watching the surroundings with calm awareness. There is always some level of alertness here. Even in rest, you notice a small detail that might easily be missed. The shelters are positioned in a way that uses the natural shape of the land. A rise blocks part of the wind. A cluster of rocks offers additional cover. Nothing is random. Over time, people would have learned which places offered better protection, better visibility, better access to resources. You might think about how different this is from modern homes. Today, buildings are designed with precise measurements, constructed with manufactured materials built to last for years or decades. Here, everything's temporary, and yet it works. The simplicity is part of its strength. A faint breeze passes through, rustling the leaves above. The sound is soft, almost soothing. It blends with the distant calls of animals and the subtle movements of the group around you. You close your eyes for a moment, just listening, then open them again, taking in the scene. One of the group rises and walks toward a nearby pile of materials. They pick up a few branches, bringing them back and adding them to one of the shelters. The movement is slow, deliberate. Maintenance. Even temporary spaces require care. Over time, small adjustments keep the structure useful. A branch replaced a gap, closed a surface, smoothed. You watch as another individual gathers a handful of leaves and spreads them inside one of the shelters, refreshing the layer beneath. It is a simple act, but it changes the feel of the space. You might not think much about something like that today. A soft surface, a place to lie down. But here it is, created by hand, piece by piece. The air grows quieter as more of the group settles into rest. The sounds of movement fade, replaced by the steady presence of the environment. You lean back again, letting your body sink into the slight give of the ground. The shelter above you filters the light, breaking it into soft patterns that shift gently with the breeze. It feels calm, safe at least for now. The land beyond remains vast and unpredictable. But here within this small arrangement of branches and leaves there is a sense of pause, a place to stop, a place to recover. And as you sit there surrounded by these simple shelters, you begin to understand that even in a world without permanence, humans have always found ways to create small spaces of comfort, spaces that hold warmth, spaces that offer rest, spaces that make the vastness of the world feel just a little more manageable. You remain seated within the quiet cluster of shelters, your body gradually settling into a deeper sense of rest. The filtered sunlight moves gently across the ground, shifting as the branches above sway with the breeze. Time here does not feel urgent. It stretches softly, marked only by light movement and the slow rhythm of breathing. Around you, the group rests in their own ways. Some lie still, their bodies relaxed, eyes closed or half open. Others sit quietly, their attention drifting between the immediate space and the land beyond. Even in rest there is awareness, a kind of quiet readiness that never fully fades. You notice how close everyone remains to one another, not crowded but connected. This is not just a collection of individuals, it is something more cohesive. A small group bound by shared experience, by movement, by survival. You shift slightly, adjusting your position against the ground. The layer of leaves beneath you rustles softly, releasing a faint, earthy scent. It is subtle, but comforting in its own way. As you observe the group more closely, patterns begin to emerge. Two individuals sit near each other, their shoulders almost touching. One reaches out briefly, adjusting something near the other's arm. The gesture is small, but it carries care. Nearby, the child you noticed earlier sits close to an older figure. The child watches as the older one handles a small object, perhaps a tool or a piece of food. After a moment, the child reaches out, attempting to mimic the movement. The older figure allows it. There's no clear instruction, no spoken correction, just presence. This is how learning happens here, not through structured teaching, but through closeness. Over many generations, early human groups formed strong social bonds. Living in small communities meant that cooperation and trust were essential. Each person depended on the others in ways that went beyond simple tasks. You begin to sense the depth of these connections. It is not just about survival in the physical sense, it is also about belonging. Being part of the group means shared protection, shared knowledge, shared effort. You lean forward slightly, resting your arms on your knees, watching the subtle interactions around you. Another pair sits together, one gently removing something from the other's hair. The movement is careful, repetitive, almost soothing. This kind of behavior, sometimes called grooming, appears across many social species. In humans, it likely served both practical and social purposes, removing debris or insects while also reinforcing bonds between individuals. It is quiet, almost meditative. You might think about how this kind of connection still exists today, though often expressed differently. A comforting touch, a shared moment of attention, a simple act of care. Here it is, direct and unspoken. You shift your gaze again, noticing how the group forms a loose circle around the shelters. There is no strict arrangement, but there is a sense of balance. No one is completely isolated. Even those who rest alone remain within sight of others. This closeness matters. Life in this environment is unpredictable. Being part of a group increases safety, but it also creates something less tangible. Continuity. Knowledge passes through these connections. Skills, habits, awareness of the land. All carried not by writing, but by presence. The child you saw earlier now moves a little further, picking up a small object from the ground. They examine it briefly, then bring it back, showing it to the older figure. The response is subtle. A glance, a slight movement, perhaps approval. Encouragement does not need to be loud to be meaningful. You lean back again, letting your head rest against the branch behind you. The texture presses lightly against your hair, grounding you in the moment. The air feels warmer now, the sun higher in the sky. The shade of the shelter keeps it comfortable, creating a balance between warmth and coolness. A faint sound drifts in from the distance, not sharp or urgent, just part of the background of this world. You listen for a moment, then let it pass. Your attention returns to the group. There is something else you begin to notice. Roles. Not in a formal sense, but in the way individuals move and act. Some seem more focused on tools, others on gathering, others on watching the surroundings. It is not fixed, not rigid, but there is a kind of natural distribution of effort. This helps the group function more smoothly. It is difficult to say exactly how structured these roles were. There were no defined positions, no clear hierarchy in the way we might understand today. But over time, patterns likely emerged based on experience, skill, and need. You watch as one individual stands and moves toward the edge of the shelter area, scanning the land beyond. Their posture is steady, attentive. Another remains seated, continuing to handle a tool, adjusting its edge with small, careful movements. Each action contributes in its own way. You might think about how this compares to modern life, where roles are often clearly defined and separated. Here everything feels more fluid, more connected. The group begins to stir slightly as time passes. Those who are resting start to shift, stretching their arms and legs. Others adjust their positions, preparing to move again. Rest is temporary. It is a pause, not an end point. You feel it too. Your body relaxed just moments ago, now ready to move once more. The shelters remain behind, quiet and still. They will not be used forever. Perhaps not even for long, but they have served their purpose. A place to rest, a place to gather, a place to remain close. You stand slowly brushing the leaves from your clothing. The ground feels firm again beneath your feet. The group begins to come together, their movements aligning once more. No words are spoken, but the intention is clear. It is time to continue. You take one last look at the shelters, the simple structures that held a brief moment of stillness. Then you turn, following the group as they step back into the open land, carrying with them not just tools or food, but the quiet strength of connection. And as you walk with them, you begin to understand that long before cities or written history, human life was already shaped by something deeply familiar: the need to belong. You walk with the group as they leave the shelter behind the branches and leave slowly blending back into the landscape, as if they were never arranged at all. The open land stretches ahead once more wide and quiet, shaped only by wind, water, and time. The sun has risen higher now, casting a gentle brightness across everything. Shadows shorten, the air warms, your steps feel lighter on the dry ground. For a while the group moves without pause. Their pace is steady, familiar, as if guided by something deeper than conscious thought. A rhythm carried through many days like this. Then gradually something shifts. It is subtle at first. The spacing between them narrows slightly, their movements slow. A certain stillness settles into their posture, not from rest, but from attention. You feel it too. Ahead, the land dips gently into a shallow hollow. The ground there is darker, the soil more compact. A few scattered stones lie across the surface, some larger than the others, arranged in no clear pattern at first glance. But as you come closer, the feeling changes. There is something different about this place. The group approaches carefully, their steps quieter now, almost deliberate in a new way. One individual moves slightly ahead, then stops at the edge of the hollow. The others gather nearby, not tightly, but with a shared awareness. You slow your pace, staying just behind them, observing. At the centre of the hollow lies a form, still, partially covered with earth and plant material. You hesitate for a moment, sensing the weight of the scene before fully understanding it. Then it becomes clear. A body! An early human, no longer moving, no longer breathing, resting in the ground. The group remains quiet. There is no sudden reaction, no outward display of emotion as you might expect. Instead, there is a kind of stillness that feels deeper than sound. You notice how one individual steps forward, slowly kneeling beside the body. Their hand moves gently, adjusting something near the surface, perhaps arranging the covering. Another stands nearby, watching their posture calm but attentive. This is not random. This is intentional. Long before written history, long before formal rituals, there is evidence that humans began to treat their dead in particular ways. Bodies were sometimes placed carefully, sometimes covered, sometimes accompanied by simple objects. Look closer. Near the body, a small stone lies shaped in a familiar way. A tool. Whether it was placed there deliberately or left by chance is not entirely certain, but its presence feels meaningful. You might not expect this kind of behaviour so early in human history, but it appears again and again in different places and times. A quiet pattern of care. The reasons are not fully clear. Perhaps it was practical, a way to protect the group from decay or animals. Perhaps it carried a deeper sense of meaning, an early awareness of loss. Or perhaps it was both. You watch as the individual near the body smooths the earth slightly, their movements slow and careful. Another gathers a few leaves, placing them gently over the surface. There is no rush, no urgency, only attention. The air feels still around you, as if even the wind has softened in response. You find yourself breathing more slowly, your thoughts quieter. This moment feels different from anything you have seen so far. Not about movement or survival in the immediate sense, but about something else. Memory. You might think about how even now humans mark these moments. With ceremonies, with words, with symbols. Here none of those exist in the way we know them. And yet something is happening. A recognition. A pause. A change in behaviour that acknowledges the presence of absence. You shift your weight slightly, careful not to disturb the ground. The soil beneath your feet feels firm, undisturbed, except for the space before you. One of the group members steps back, making room for another to move forward. The exchange is quiet, almost instinctive. Each person seems to take a moment, not long, but enough. It is difficult to say exactly what they're thinking. or if their thoughts resemble anything we would recognize today. But their actions suggest that this moment matters. Something easily overlooked is how early such behaviors may have begun. The idea that humans, even in these early stages, recognize death in a way that influenced their actions. You notice the child again standing slightly behind the others. They watch closely, their gaze fixed on the scene. They do not move forward, but they do not look away either. This is how understanding passes on. Not through explanation, but through witnessing. Over time, moments like this would shape how individuals respond to loss, to change, to the cycle of life itself. The group remains there for a while longer, though it is difficult to measure how long. Time feels different in this space, less defined by minutes and more by presence. Eventually, one individual steps back, fully turning slightly toward the open land. The others follow. The movement is slow but clear. It is time to leave. There is no final gesture, no closing action. The body remains where it is covered part of the earth once more. The group begins to walk again, their pace gentle at first, then gradually returning to its steady rhythm. You follow, glancing back once. The hollow grows smaller in the distance, blending again into the natural patterns of the land. But the feeling remains. You walk in silence for a while, your attention turned inward. This moment has added something to your understanding. Not just of survival, but of connection across time. Even here, before written words, before recorded beliefs, there is already a sense that life is noticed, remembered, and in some quiet way honoured. The group continues forward their movements unchanged on the surface, and yet something beneath it feels deeper now. A layer added, a recognition carried forward. You step with them, your pace matching theirs once more, the rhythm of walking returning. But the stillness of that hollow lingers gently in your thoughts, like a quiet echo that does not fade. You continue walking with the group, the quiet memory of the hollow fading slowly behind you, though not completely gone. It lingers somewhere in your awareness like a soft imprint that does not need to be spoken to be understood. The land stretches forward once again, open and gently uneven, shaped by time in ways that feel both subtle and vast. The sun has climbed higher, warming the ground and lifting a faint shimmer from the surface of the earth. After some time, the group begins to slow, not from fatigue but from recognition. Ahead, the terrain changes slightly. The ground rises into a low formation of the rock, its surface worn smooth in places, rough in others. There's a narrow opening at its base, partially hidden by shadow. As you draw closer, you realize what it is. A cave? Not large, not deep enough to disappear into darkness entirely, but enough to offer shelter. The air near its entrance feels cooler, touched by the shade within. The group approaches with calm familiarity. This is not a place of hesitation. It is known. You follow at a respectful distance, stepping carefully as the ground becomes more uneven with scattered stones and small debris. Inside, the light softens. The sounds of the outside world fade, slightly replaced by a quiet stillness that feels almost enclosed. The temperature drops just enough to be noticeable, a gentle contrast to the warmth outside. You pause just inside the entrance, letting your eyes adjust. At first the cave seems empty, then slowly shapes begin to emerge along the walls. Faint lines, marks. You step closer, your gaze narrowing. They are not random. There is intention here. Simple forms etched or painted onto the stone surface. Some are lines that curve and intersect. Others resemble shapes you almost recognize. The outline of an animal, perhaps. A suggestion of movement captured in stillness. You feel a quiet shift in the atmosphere. This is different. This is not just survival. This is expression. Long before written language, humans found ways to leave marks that carried meaning. Cave art appears in many parts of the world, some of it dating back tens of thousands of years. The exact purpose of these images remains uncertain, but their presence is undeniable. You move closer to one of the markings, careful not to touch it. The surface of the rock feels cool, slightly rough, holding the image in place. The lines are not perfect. They vary in thickness, in depth, in clarity, but they are deliberate. You might not expect such detail in a time so early, but the ability to create images like this suggests a different kind of thinking. Not just reacting to the world, but representing it. You glance around the cave again. There are more markings than you first noticed, some higher on the wall, others closer to the ground. A few overlap slightly, as if added at different times. This place has been used more than once. A small detail catches your attention. Near one of the drawings, a faint smudge remains darker than the surrounding stone. Perhaps from pigment, perhaps from repeated contact. Early humans used natural materials to create these images. Charcoal from fires, minerals ground into powder mixed with water or fat to form simple paints. You imagine the process. Someone standing here in this quiet space holding a piece of charcoal, pressing it against the rock. Moving their hands, slowly shaping lines that reflect something they have seen or remembered. An animal in motion. A moment from the hunt. A pattern that holds meaning within the group. It is easy to overlook how significant this is. To create something that lasts beyond the moment. To leave a mark that remains when you are no longer there. You step back slightly, taking in the full wall. The image is not loud or dramatic, but they carry a quiet presence. They draw your attention without demanding it. Some of the figures seem more detailed than others. One animal's shape appears with a clear outline of legs and head, while another is more abstract, suggested through a few simple strokes. This variation hints at different levels of skill or perhaps different intentions. Not every mark needs to be precise to be meaningful. You notice one of the group members standing near the wall, their gaze fixed on a particular image. They do not touch it, but their attention lingers. Another sits nearby, resting against the stone, their body relaxed in the cool shade. The cave offers more than shelter. It offers a place to pause, to gather, to reflect in a way that feels different from the open land. You might wonder what these images meant to those who created them. Were they records of events, symbols of belief, or simply a way to share experiences within the group? There is no single answer. Even now, interpretations vary. Some patterns suggest connections to hunting, perhaps as a way to remember or prepare. Others seem less tied to immediate survival, hinting at something more abstract. You take a slow breath, the cool air filling your lungs. The cave feels calm, steady. The outside world continues beyond its entrance, but here there is a sense of stillness that invites attention. You move a little further inside, careful with each step. The ground is uneven, scattered with small stones and patches of dust. Your footsteps echo softly, a gentle sound that fades quickly. Another marking appears along the wall, this one higher up. You tilt your head slightly to see it more clearly. It is simple, just a few lines forming a shape that could be a hand or perhaps something else entirely. A reminder that not everything needs to be fully understood to be felt. You step back toward the entrance, where the light from outside begins to return. The group starts to shift, some moving deeper into the cave, others remaining near the opening. This place holds something important, not in a loud or obvious way, but in a quiet, lasting one. You pause once more, looking at the markings on the wall, and as you stand there, you begin to sense that this is one of the earliest ways humans began to hold on to their experiences, not just through memory, but through marks that remain. You linger near the cave entrance for a moment longer, letting your eyes rest on the faint markings that remain etched into the stone. The air inside stays cool and still, while outside the sunlight continues to brighten the land. Gradually the group begins to move again. One by one they step away from the cave, returning to the open world beyond. There is no final glance, no clear farewell to the place. Yet it feels understood that this space will remain part of their path, something they may return to when the time is right. You follow them out, the warmth of the sun meeting your skin once more. The light feels stronger now, the day fully awake. The sky stretches wide and pale blue above you, with only a few faint traces of cloud drifting slowly. The group sets a steady pace, moving across the land with quiet familiarity. You fall into step behind them, your body adjusting to the rhythm once again. Walking, always walking. The ground beneath you carries subtle changes. Dry soil gives way to patches of firmer earth, then back again. Small stones shift underfoot, creating soft crunching sounds that blend into the movement of the group. After some time, you begin to notice something else. The direction of travel is not random. The group is following a path that feels remembered. Not a visible trail in the way you might expect today, but a route shaped by repetition, by many journeys taken before this one. You look around them all carefully. Certain features begin to stand out. A distinctive rock formation slightly taller than the others, a cluster of trees growing in a particular shape, a shallow dip in the land where water may collect after rain. These are landmarks, points of reference that help guide movement across a vast and otherwise open environment. Over many seasons, early humans would have learned to recognize and remember such features, using them to navigate long distances without maps or written directions. You walk past the tall rock formation, glancing at it as the group does. It stands out against the horizon, a quiet marker that might be seen from far away. You imagine returning to this place after days or weeks of travel and recognizing it immediately, a sense of orientation in a world without signs. The group continues forward, their pace steady and unbroken. As you walk, the light begins to shift slightly. The sun moves higher and the shadows grow shorter, more compact beneath objects. The air warms further, carrying a faint dryness now. The landscape ahead begins to open again, the vegetation thinning as the ground stretches wider and flatter. In the distance you notice movement. At first it is subtle, just a suggestion of motion against the horizon. But as you continue it becomes clearer. Animals, a different group than before. Smaller, moving in a loose formation, their shapes lighter and quicker. The group you are following does not react immediately. They continue walking, observing from a distance. There is no urgency here. Not every encounter leads to action. You notice how one individual glances toward the animals, then back toward the land ahead. The decision seems to be made without words. They will continue. This is another part of the rhythm, knowing when to act and when to conserve energy. The ground beneath you becomes slightly warmer, the sun now strong enough to heat the surface. You feel it through your feet with each step. A faint breeze passes through, offering brief relief. You might find yourself thinking about how different this constant movement feels compared to modern life. Today, travel often has a clear beginning and end, a destination, a purpose. Here, movement is continuous. There is no final arrival, only ongoing adjustment. The group slows slightly as they approach a shallow rise. From the top, the land beyond becomes visible. You follow them up your steps, careful on the uneven slope. At the top you pause. The view stretches out in front of you. Rolling land dotted with patches of vegetation. Occasional clusters of trees and distant shapes that hint at water or changing terrain. It is vast, and yet the group seems to understand it. They stand for a moment, scanning the distance. Their eyes move across the land, taking in details that you might not immediately notice. The position of the sun, the direction of the wind, the subtle colour changes that suggest different types of ground. All of it matters. You stand beside them, trying to see what they see. It is not easy. Much of this knowledge is built over time through repeated experience. Generations before you walked this same land, noticing the same patterns, passing that awareness forward in quiet ways. The group begins to move again, descending the rise and continuing toward a slightly greener area in the distance. The shift in colour suggests moisture, perhaps a source of water. Water shapes everything here. It determines where plants grow, where animals gather, where humans move. You follow your step, steady or breathing calm. As you walk, you begin to feel the continuity of it all. Each step connected to the ones before, each path shaped by memory and necessity. There is no written record of these journeys, no maps drawn to mark the way, and yet the land itself becomes a kind of memory, held in the mind, shared through movement, reinforced with each return. You glance back briefly. The cave is no longer visible. The markings inside it remain behind part of a different moment. Ahead the path continues. You turn forward again, letting your gaze settle on the horizon. And as you walk with a group following invisible routes across an ever-changing landscape, you begin to understand how movement itself becomes a form of knowledge, a way of remembering, a way of surviving. You continue down from the rise, your steps steady as the ground slopes gently beneath you. The air feels warmer now, carrying the faint scent of dry grass mixed with something softer, perhaps moisture from the greener stretch ahead. The group moves in quiet coordination, their attention spread across the landscape. Nothing seems to escape their notice. Every shift in colour, every distant movement, every subtle change in the ground is quietly observed. As you walk, something begins to feel different. At first, it is only a slight awareness, a sense that the land ahead is not entirely empty. Then you see them, figures, not far but not close enough to see clearly at first. Moving slowly across the open space, their shapes familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. You slow your pace, your body instinctively becoming more still. The group you are with has noticed as well. Their movement changes, becoming more deliberate. Not stopping, but adjusting. Their spacing tightens slightly, their attention focused forward. As the distance closes, the figures become clearer. They are human, and yet not quite like the ones you've been walking with. Their posture is slightly different. Their build perhaps a little broader. Their movements carry a different rhythm. You feel a quiet tension settle into the air. This is an encounter. Long before a single human type spread across the world, multiple human species lived at the same time. They shared landscapes, sometimes overlapping in territory, sometimes crossing paths like this. You stand still for a moment watching. The other group has stopped as well. There is distance between you, but not enough to ignore. For a brief moment, neither side moves. The wind passes gently between both groups, carrying no urgency, no alarm, just the natural flow of air across open land. You might expect fear or immediate retreat, but instead there is observation. Careful, measured. One individual from your group shifts slightly, adjusting their stance. Across the space, someone from the other group does the same. It is not confrontation, but it is not complete ease either. There is uncertainty here. You begin to notice the small details. The way their heads tilt slightly as they watch. The way their hands remain free, not raised but ready. The way their bodies remain balanced, prepared for movement if needed. This is a moment that could shift in many directions. Over time, different human groups would have interacted in various ways, sometimes avoiding each other, sometimes competing for resources, and at times perhaps even sharing space or exchanging knowledge in quiet ways. You take a slow breath, feeling the stillness stretch. Then something changes. One of the individuals from the other group takes a small step to the side, not forward, not backward, just a slight shift. It is enough. Your group responds by easing their posture just slightly, not fully relaxed but less tense. The space between both groups remains. No one crosses it. A kind of unspoken understanding forms. You stay here, we stay there. The moment continues, held in quiet balance. You notice how similar and different they are at the same time. The same basic shape of body, the same upright movement, the same awareness of the environment, and yet there are differences in form, in gesture, in subtle ways of carrying themselves. You might find yourself wondering what they would think of each other. Would they recognize something familiar, or focus more on the differences? It is difficult to know. There are only traces left behind in the distant future. Bones tools, small signs of interaction that hint at moments like this. The tension does not fully disappear, but it softens. After a while, one member of your group turns slightly, beginning to move away. The others follow, not in a hurried way, but with quiet intention. The decision is clear. Continue on. You follow as well, your step steady, though your mind lingers on what you have just seen. As you move, you glance back. The other group remains where they are for a moment longer, then slowly resumes their own movement, heading in a different direction. The distance between you grows, the encounter fades, but it leaves something behind, a sense that the world you're walking through is shared, not empty. That other lives move across the same land, following their own paths shaped by the same needs. You continue forward with your group, the rhythm of walking, returning once more. The ground beneath your feet feels steady again, familiar. The air carries the same quiet sounds, the same gentle movement of wind and distant life. And yet something feels slightly different now. A broader awareness. You are not alone in this world. Not just within your group, but beyond it. Other humans in different forms moving through the same vast landscape. Their paths crossing only briefly, then separating again. You walk on your gaze, settling forward once more. And as the distance grows between you and the others, you begin to understand that human history, even in these early moments, is not a single line, but many paths moving alongside each other, sometimes touching, often passing by, all part of the same quiet story. You walk on with the group, the memory of the encounter fading gently behind you like a ripple that slowly settles back into still water. The land stretches wide, once more open and quiet, with only the soft rhythm of footsteps and the whisper of wind to accompany you. The ground begins to change again beneath your feet. At first it's only a slight difference. The soil feels firmer, more compact, then gradually the colour shifts. Patches of earth appear lighter, almost pale in the sunlight, while others darken as if holding on to hidden moisture. The air carries a different scent now, cooler, faintly damp. You notice how the group responds before you fully understand why. Their pace slows, their attention sharpens. Ahead, the land dips gently, forming a shallow basin. As you approach, a soft shimmer appears across its surface. Water, not a rushing river or a deep lake, but a quiet, spreading pool. Its edges are irregular, shaped by the land rather than contained by it. The surface reflects the sky in broken fragments, disturbed occasionally by the faintest movement. The group moves toward it without hesitation. Water draws everything closer. You follow, feeling the temperature shift as you near. The air becomes cooler, the ground softer underfoot. Small patches of mud press slightly beneath your steps, leaving faint impressions that slowly begin to fade. At the edge the group pauses, not from uncertainty but from habit. One individual steps forward first, crouching low, watching the surface carefully. Another stands slightly behind, scanning the surrounding land. It is never just about the water itself. It is about what might be near it. Animals come here too, some to drink, others to hunt. You stand quietly, taking in the stillness. The water reflects the sky in soft, wavering patterns. A faint ripple spreads across the surface, then disappears. After a moment, the first individual leans forward, bringing their hands to the water. They lift it slowly, letting it pass over their fingers before bringing it to their mouth. Others follow. You kneel as well, lowering your hand into the pool. It is cool. Colder than you expected. The sensation travels through your fingers, up your arm, grounding you in the moment. You lift your hand slightly, letting the water slip back down, catching the light as it falls. There is something simple and essential about this. Water shapes everything here. The presence of it determines where plants grow, where animals gather, where paths are formed and followed again and again. You notice small tracks near the edge of the pool. Some are narrow and pointed, likely from smaller animals. Others are larger, deeper, pressed firmly into the mud. Each one tells a story of movement, of arrival and departure, of life passing through the same space. You trace one of the deeper impressions with your eyes, noticing how the edges have begun to soften. Not fresh, but not old either. This place is visited often. You might think about how over time early humans would come to recognize these places, returning to them when needed. The memory of water held not in maps, but in the mind, reinforced with each journey. The group spreads out slightly around the edge. Some drink, others watch. A few move along the perimeter, examining the ground, the plants, the surrounding area. Nothing is wasted. Even the time spent here is part of a larger awareness. You notice one individual kneel near a patch of thicker growth, pulling gently at something hidden beneath the surface. A plant perhaps drawn by the moisture in the soil. The connection between water and food is clear. Where one exists, the other often follows. The breeze shifts slightly, carrying a new scent, faint but distinct. You see the reaction immediately. Heads lift. Eyes scan. The group becomes still again, though not tense, just attentive. In the distance, beyond the far edge of the water, movement appears. A small group of animals approaches slowly, their steps cautious. They have come for the same reason. Water brings different paths together. The group you are with does not move to intercept them. Instead, they remain where they are, allowing space. There is an understanding here, not spoken but practiced. The animals draw closer, lowering their heads as they reach the water. They drink in quick, alert movements, lifting their heads often to look around. The moment is shared. Not cooperative, not hostile. Simply parallel. You watch as both groups exist within the same space, each aware of the other, each maintaining distance. It is a delicate balance, one that can shift quickly if disturbed. But for now it holds. You feel your own breathing slow, matching the calm of the scene. The water reflects both sky and movement, holding the image briefly before letting it dissolve. After some time, the animals begin to move away, their needs satisfied. The group around you remains a little longer, resting, watching, waiting. Then gradually they begin to gather again. The pause has ended. You stand brushing the dampness from your hands onto your clothing. The cool sensation fades slowly, replaced by the warmth of the air. You take one last look at the water. The surface has returned to stillness as if nothing had disturbed it at all. But beneath that stillness lies connection. Between places, between living things, between moments that repeat across time. You turn and follow the group as they step away from the edge, their path leading once more into the open land. And as you walk, you begin to understand how something as simple as water quietly shapes the movement of everything around it, guiding paths, creating patterns, holding life together in ways that need no explanation. You leave the water behind your steps, returning to the steady rhythm of the group. The damp ground gives way to firmer soil once more, and the air gradually loses its cool edge. The warmth of the day settles around you again, gentle but constant. As you walk, you begin to notice something you had only glimpsed before: the coverings. They move with each step, shifting softly with the body. Some hang loosely over shoulders, others are wrapped more tightly, held in place with simple ties or knots. The textures vary. Some appear thicker, heavier, while others are thinner, more flexible. You watch more closely now. These are not random pieces of material. They are shaped. Over time, people have learned how to take what the land provides and turn it into something that protects them. Animal hides taken from hunts are cleaned, scraped, and dried. The process is slow and requires attention, but the result offers warmth, especially when the air turns cold. You can almost imagine the earlier steps: the careful removal of the hide, the work of stretching it, the time spent softening it so it can bend and move without breaking. None of this happens quickly, and yet it becomes part of daily life. You reach out gently, brushing your fingers against the edge of one covering as someone passes close by. The surface feels rough, but not harsh. There is a softness beneath it, the result of repeated handling. It holds warmth. That is what matters most. The wind picks up slightly, and you notice how the coverings respond. They shift but remain in place, creating a barrier between the skin and the air. Even a thin layer makes a difference. You might think about how easy it is today to choose clothing without much thought. Layers for warmth, fabrics designed for comfort. Here each piece represents effort, time, knowledge. You continue walking, your attention drawn to the small variations. One individual wears a covering that reaches further down, protecting more of their body. Another has something wrapped around their legs, offering additional insulation. A child wears a smaller version fitted loosely, but enough to provide protection. Nothing is identical. Each piece reflects what was available, what was needed. There is no single style, only function. The group slows briefly as they move through a slightly shaded area. The temperature drops just a little, and you feel the difference immediately. The coverings become more noticeable here. Without them, the shift would be sharper. You imagine colder times when the air carries a deeper chill, when the sun offers less warmth. In those moments, these simple materials would become even more important. A small detail catches your eye. One of the coverings has been repaired. A tier near the edge has been pulled together using a thin strip of fibre tied carefully to hold it in place. The repair is not perfect, but it works. Nothing is wasted if it can still be used. You might not expect this kind of care, but it makes sense. Materials are not easily replaced. Each piece carries value beyond its immediate use. The group continues forward, their pace steady. You notice one individual adjusting their covering, pulling it tighter around their shoulders as the breeze shifts again. The movement is automatic, practiced. It becomes clear that these coverings are not just worn, they are managed, adjusted throughout the day depending on the conditions, a quiet interaction between body and environment. As you walk, you begin to understand how this changes survival. Without protection, exposure to cold could weaken the body over time. Even in milder conditions, maintaining warmth conserves energy. These small advantages add up. They allow for longer movement, greater endurance, more flexibility in where the group can travel. The land ahead opens slightly and the sunlight returns in full. The warmth presses gently against your skin, and you feel your body relax a little. The coverings shift again, some loosen slightly as the need for warmth decreases. Adaptation continues, not just across generations, but within each day. You step over a patch of uneven ground, your foot brushing against a small stone. It rolls slightly, then settles again. Your attention returns to the group. They move with a quiet confidence shaped by repeated experience. You notice how the coverings move with them, not restricting but supporting, allowing freedom of motion while offering protection. It is a balance. Too heavy and movement becomes difficult. Too light and the cold seeps through. Over time, this balance is learned, refined through use, passed along without words. You might imagine how these early forms of clothing would continue to change. New techniques, better ways of preparing materials, more effective ways of fastening and shaping. But even here in this early moment, the foundation is already present. The idea that the body can be protected, that the environment can be managed even in small ways. The group begins to slow again, not stopping, but easing their pace as the land ahead shifts once more. You follow your steps, steady your mind, still holding the image of those simple coverings. And as you walk, you begin to see how something as quiet as a layer of hide can shape the course of human life. Not through grand change, but through steady everyday use, keeping warmth close, holding the body safe, allowing movement to continue no matter where the path leads. You continue walking with the group, the warmth of the sun settling gently across your shoulders. The land stretches ahead in soft waves, rising and falling in a quiet rhythm that matches your steps. The air carries a faint dryness again, though not as sharp as before. After some time, a familiar scent reaches you. Smoke. It drifts lightly on the breeze, thin but unmistakable. You follow it with your eyes, noticing a faint haze ahead just above the ground. The group adjusts direction slightly, moving toward it. As you draw closer, the scent becomes stronger, richer. It carries with it something else now, something deeper. Food. You feel a quiet sense of recognition. The fire. Not just for warmth this time, for something more. The group approaches a small clearing where the ground has been used before. The signs are subtle but present. Darkened patches of earth, scattered fragments of wood, a space that has held fire more than once. At the centre, a small flame flickers steady and controlled. You move closer, feeling the heat reach you even before you fully step into the space. The group gathers around it, their movements calm, familiar. One individual kneels near the fire, adjusting the arrangement of wood. Another brings something forward, holding it carefully. It is food. A piece of meat, perhaps from an earlier hunt, or something gathered and prepared in a different way. They hold it close to the flame, not directly in it, but near enough to feel the heat. You watch as the surface begins to change. Slowly, the colour deepens, the texture tightens. A faint sound emerges, soft and steady. Cooking. It might seem simple, almost ordinary. But here it is something important. Heating food changes it in ways that are not immediately visible. It softens tough fibres, making it easier to chew. It alters taste. It can even make certain foods safer to eat. You notice how the group waits. There is no rush. The process takes time. The fire crackles gently, sending small sparks upward that fade into the air. You sit down nearby, the warmth reaching you again, steady and comforting. The scent of cooking grows stronger, filling the space with something rich and grounding. You might think about how this changes daily life. Food that once required effort to break down becomes easier to consume. Meals can be shared more comfortably, more slowly. The act of eating shifts. It becomes less about immediate need, more about process. You watch as one individual turns the food, slightly adjusting its position. Their movements are careful, practiced. They know how close is too close. They know how long is enough. This kind of understanding comes from repetition. From watching, trying, adjusting. A small detail stands out. The fire itself is arranged in a particular way. Not just a pile of wood, but a structure that allows the flames to breathe. Gaps between pieces, space for air to move. This helps the fire stay alive longer, burn more steadily. Even here there is a kind of quiet knowledge at work. You shift your position slightly, feeling the warmth against your legs, your hands. The contrast between fire and open air becomes clear again. Without it, the space would feel entirely different. Cooler, less defined. You glance around the clearing. The ground holds traces of earlier use. Ash pressed into the soil. Small fragments of bone. Pieces of wood worn down by previous fires. This place has been returned to. Again and again. A familiar stop along a larger path. The group settles in more fully now. Some sit. Others remain standing, watching the surroundings while the food continues to cook. The balance remains. Rest and awareness. You notice the child again sitting close to one of the adults, watching the process closely. Their eyes follow every movement, every adjustment. This is how knowledge continues, not explained but shown, passed along through observation. The smell grows stronger as the food reaches a certain point. One individual tests it carefully, touching it briefly, then pulling back. Satisfied. They remove it from the heat, letting it rest for a moment. Then slowly they begin to divide it, sharing. Each piece passed from one to another, not equally in size but evenly in intention. Everyone receives something. You take a moment to observe this. There is no visible system, no spoken agreement. And yet it works. The group eats quietly. No loud sounds, no sudden movements. Just steady consumption, each person focused on their portion. You bring your attention to the food itself. The texture is changed, softer, easier. The difference is clear even from where you sit. You might not think much of it today, but here it matters. Less effort spent chewing, less strain on the body, more energy gained. Over time, these small changes shape everything. The fire continues to burn, though its intensity softens slightly as the main cooking ends. You lean back, resting your hands against the ground behind you. The warmth, the scent, the quiet presence of the group all come together into a single moment. Calm, steady. You might notice how different this feels from eating in a rushed way. Here there is no distraction, no urgency, just presence. The group finishes slowly, each person completing their portion before settling back. The remains are not discarded carelessly. Bones are set aside. Small pieces are examined, sometimes broken further. Nothing is wasted if it still holds value. The fire is adjusted again, the wood repositioned to keep it alive, though smaller now. The clearing settles into a quieter state. A pause after activity. You sit there for a moment longer, letting the warmth and stillness settle into you. And as you do, you begin to understand how something as simple as cooking transforms not just food, but the rhythm of life itself, slowing it, shaping it, bringing people together in small shared moments around a steady flame. You remain seated near the fading warmth of the fire, your body at ease after the quiet rhythm of eating. The air feels softer now, touched by heat that lingers even as the flames begin to settle lower. The scent of smoke drifts lightly around you, blending with the dry earth and faint traces of cooked food. For a while, nothing demands attention. The group rests in that gentle pause that follows effort. Some lean back, eyes half closed. Others sit upright, watching the edges of the clearing with calm awareness. Then slowly something begins to happen. It is not sudden, not announced. Just a shift. One individual leans slightly forward, their gaze not fixed on anything in particular, but turned inward as if recalling something. They make a soft sound, low and steady, different from the brief signals you've heard before. It continues for a moment. A rhythm, not quite speech. Not random either. You notice how others respond. Heads turn, eyes focus. The group does not interrupt. They listen. The sound changes slightly, rising and falling, forming a pattern that repeats in a loose way. There are pauses, then continuation. It feels intentional. You might not understand the meaning, not in the way you would follow a modern conversation, but there is a sense that something is being shared, a moment remembered, an event recalled, or perhaps something simpler. A pattern of sound that brings the group into a shared space of attention. You sit quietly, letting the sound settle around you. Another individual adds a soft response, shorter but connected. The tone shifts slightly, creating a kind of exchange, back and forth. Not fast, not complex, but meaningful in its own way. Over long stretches of time, humans have carried knowledge through memory. Before writing, before symbols that could be stored outside the mind, everything important had to be remembered and passed along through repetition and shared experience. You begin to notice how the rhythm helps. The slight repetition of sounds, the pacing, it makes the sequence easier to follow, easier to hold. You might think about how even today rhythm helps memory. Songs' patterns, familiar phrases. They stay with us more easily than scattered information. Here something similar is beginning to take shape. Not language as you know it, but something that moves in that direction. The child sits closer now, their attention fixed on the sound. Their body leans forward, slightly absorbing the moment. This is how memory travels, not through instruction, through presence. Through listening, the fire crackles softly, adding its own rhythm beneath the sounds. A small piece of wood shifts, sending a brief spark upward before settling again. The voices continue rising and falling, forming a loose pattern that feels both structured and free. You notice a small gesture accompanying one of the sounds. A hand lifts slightly, tracing a shape in the air before lowering again. The gesture matches the tone, reinforcing it, adding another layer. It becomes clear that sound and movement are not separate here. They work together. You feel yourself becoming more still, your breathing slower, your attention drawn fully into the moment. The outside world fades slightly. The distant land, the open sky, the path ahead. All of it remains, but for now this circle of shared attention becomes the center. You might not expect this kind of moment in a world focused on survival, but it fits. Survival is not only physical, it also depends on memory, knowing where to go, what to avoid, what to repeat. These things must be carried somehow, and this is one way. The sounds begin to soften the rhythm, slowing the pauses, growing longer. One voice fades, another follows. The exchange comes to a quiet end, not with a clear finish, but with a gradual easing. The group remains still for a moment longer. Then slowly movement returns. Someone shifts position. Another reaches for a nearby object. The circle loosens. The moment passes, but something remains. A shared understanding that does not need to be spoken again. You lean back slightly, your hands resting against the ground, feeling the warmth that still lingers there. The fire burns lower now, its light softer, its presence quieter. The air cools just a little as the sun begins its slow movement downward. You glance around the clearing. The signs of activity remain. The fire, the scattered materials, the subtle impressions in the soil. But now there is something else layered into the space. Memory. Not visible in the same way, but present, carried within the group. You might think about how different this feels from written records. There are no marks to preserve this moment, no symbols to capture it, and yet it continues, held in the mind, passed forward in ways that leave no physical trace. The group begins to shift again, preparing to move. The pause is ending. The rhythm of walking will return. You rise slowly, brushing the dust from your hands, your body adjusting once more to movement. As you follow the group out of the clearing, you take one last look at the fading fire. The sounds have disappeared. The moment has passed, but the memory of it moves with you. And as you step back into the open land, you begin to understand how the earliest threads of shared knowledge are not written in stone, but carried quietly from one person to another, held in sound, in rhythm, in presence. You move with the group as they leave the quiet clearing behind the faint glow of the fire disappearing into the distance. The ground returns to its familiar rhythm beneath your feet, firm in some places, uneven in others. The air feels balanced now, no longer carrying the strong warmth of midday, but not yet cooling into evening. The pace is steady again, walking, always returning to it. After some time, the land begins to shift in a way that feels familiar, though not identical to what you've seen before. The ground dips slightly, forming a shallow curve. The soil here is darker, pressed down by repeated movement. You feel it before you fully understand it. A quiet recognition in the way the group slows. Not stopping, just easing. The space ahead holds something that draws attention without calling for it. You step forward carefully, your senses sharpening in response. There, near the center of the dip, lies another place shaped by intention. Not a shelter, not a fire, something more still. The ground has been disturbed here, but not in the scattered way of passing feet. It has been opened, then closed again, forming a subtle rise that does not match the natural flow of the land. You recognize it. Another resting place. The group approaches without hesitation, but with a softness in their movement. Their steps grow quieter, their spacing closer. No one speaks. No signal is given. And yet the change is clear. One individual moves slightly ahead, pausing near the raised ground. They stand there for a moment, looking down, their posture steady. Others gather nearby, forming a loose circle. You remain just outside it, observing. There is no repetition of the earlier moment, no identical actions. This time feels slightly different. One person kneels, placing a hand on the ground. Not digging, not uncovering, just resting there briefly. Another adjusts a small stone at the edge, shifting it slightly before stepping back. Small actions. Simple, but not without meaning. You notice how the group remains present for a short time, neither rushing nor lingering too long. It is a pause, a recognition. The land holds more than just paths and resources. It holds memory. Not written, not marked in obvious ways, but carried in the awareness of those who move through it. You might think about how this understanding builds over time, how certain places become known not just for what they provide, but for what they represent. A crossing point, a shelter, a resting place, a moment held. The child stands a little closer this time, their gaze fixed on the ground. They do not move forward, but they do not look away either. Learning continues. Quietly, without instruction. You shift your weight slightly, feeling the firmness of the soil beneath your feet. The air feels still here. Even the breeze seems to move more gently, as if passing through with less force. It is difficult to describe exactly what changes in a place like this. Nothing visible shifts dramatically, and yet the atmosphere feels different, more contained, more focused. The group begins to move again after a short while. Not all at once, one steps back, then another. The circle opens. The moment closes. You follow as they continue forward, your steps slow at first, then returning to their usual rhythm. As you walk, you glance back. The slight rise in the ground blends again into the landscape, becoming just another part of the earth. Without context, it might pass unnoticed, but now you see it differently. You understand that it holds something, not in the form of objects or structures, but in the continuity of awareness. The group moves on without looking back. Their attention shifts once more to the land ahead. The path continues, and yet the presence of places like that remains, scattered across the landscape, unmarked in obvious ways, but known, carried forward in memory. You might reflect on how even now humans return to certain places again and again, not always for practical reasons, sometimes simply because those places hold meaning, a connection to something that cannot be easily explained. Here that connection exists in its earliest form. Simple, unspoken, but real. The sun begins to lower slightly in the sky, the light softening as it stretches across the land. Shadows grow longer, reaching outward from stones, from plants, from the figures moving ahead of you. The air cools just a little. You feel it as you walk. The rhythm continues. Step after step, the group moves as one, shaped by shared experience, by patterns that have formed over countless days like this. You follow your thoughts quieter now, your attention resting more fully in the present. The land ahead holds more of the same, more movement, more pauses, more moments that pass without being recorded yet leave their mark in subtle ways. And as you walk, you begin to understand that memory in this world does not depend on permanence. It lives in repetition. In return, in the quiet recognition of places that matter, you continue walking with the group, the memory of the quiet place fading into the background as the rhythm of movement takes over again. The land stretches outward in long, gentle curves, and the sky above feels wide and open, holding a soft light that begins to shift toward the later part of the day. The air carries a faint dryness again, mixed with something cooler that hints at distant change. As you move forward, the ground beneath your feet begins to feel different. Not just in texture, but in character. There are small stones scattered more frequently now, some pressed into the soil, others resting loosely on the surface. The colour of the earth shifts slightly, becoming lighter, in some areas darker in others. The group moves without hesitation, This place is not unfamiliar to them. Over many journeys, people have crossed landscapes like this, slowly extending their movement beyond the places where they first lived. Not in a single moment, not as a planned expansion, but step by step following food, water, and changing conditions. You notice how the horizon ahead looks different, less defined, as if the land is opening into something new. You walk a little further and the shift becomes clearer. The vegetation changes. The plants here are not the same as those you saw before. Some are shorter, more spread out. Others grow in tighter clusters, their leaves shaped differently, their colours slightly altered. You might not recognise them immediately, but the group does. Their attention adjusts their movements, adapting to what is available here. This is how people move into new places. Not all at once, not with certainty, but with awareness, learning as they go. You feel the ground rise gently beneath your feet, leading to a wider view of the land beyond. From here you can see further. The landscape stretches in layers, each one slightly different from the last. Some areas appear more barren, others more fertile. There are hints of water in the distance, faint reflections catching the light. You pause for a moment, taking it in. This is part of a much larger journey. Long before any maps existed, before borders or names, humans began to move outward from their earliest origins. Over many generations, they spread across continents, adapting to new environments, encountering unfamiliar conditions. You begin to sense how slow this process is. Not a single migration, but many. Not one group, but countless groups, each following their own path, their own rhythm. The group you are with continues forward, their steps steady, their attention focused. You follow your body, adjusting to the slight incline, your breathing calm. As you walk, you notice something else. The sky feels larger here, not because it has changed, but because the land beneath it has. Fewer trees, more open space. The light reaches further, touching more of the ground. The air moves differently too, the wind travelling more freely across the surface. You feel it brush against your skin, carrying with it a sense of distance. You might think about how each new place requires adjustment. Different plants, different animals, different challenges, and yet the same basic needs remain. Food, water, shelter, connection. The group begins to slow slightly as they approach a stretch of land that dips downward again. You follow, stepping carefully as the ground becomes looser underfoot. At the bottom, the soil feels softer, more compacted in places where water may have passed through before. There are faint traces here, not just from animals, from people. Footprints worn into the earth, not fresh, but not completely gone either. Someone has been here before, perhaps not recently, but enough to leave a mark. You kneel briefly, examining one of the impressions. It is similar to the ones you saw earlier, but slightly different in shape. A reminder that different groups move through these spaces at different times. The land is shared even when paths do not cross directly. You stand again, brushing your hands against your sides. The group moves through the dip and begins to rise again on the other side. The light shifts slightly as the sun lowers further, casting longer shadows across the ground. You notice how the colour of the land changes with the light. Warmer tones now, softer contrasts. The world feels calmer as the day begins its slow transition. The group continues forward, their movement unbroken. You follow your steps, steady your mind, reflecting on the scale of what you are witnessing. This is not just a journey across land, it is part of a much larger pattern. A gradual spreading, a quiet expansion, humans moving outward, adapting, learning, carrying their knowledge with them, not written, not recorded, but held within the group, passed forward through action, through memory, through presence. You glance around once more, taking in the unfamiliar plants, the open sky, the shifting ground. This place is different, and yet the group moves through it with the same calm rhythm, step by step, learning as they go. You continue with them, your pace aligned, your attention open. And as you walk into this slightly unfamiliar land, you begin to understand how the story of human movement is not defined by single moments, but by countless small steps taken across time, each one leading a little further, each one shaping what comes next. You continue forward, the ground rising gently beneath your feet before levelling out again. The light has softened further now, stretching long across the land and settling into warmer tones. Shadows drift slowly beside you, lengthening with each step. The air feels different here, drier, thinner somehow, as if the land itself holds less moisture. The breeze moves more freely, brushing across your skin without interruption, carries faint traces of dust, lifting small particles from the ground and guiding them across the open space. The group adjusts without pause. Their pace remains steady, but their movements become slightly more deliberate. Each step placed with quiet awareness, each shift in direction measured. The land ahead opens into a broad stretch where vegetation grows sparse. Low plants cling to the earth in scattered patches, their leaves small, shaped to hold what little moisture they can. You walk carefully, noticing how the ground changes beneath you. In some places it feels firm and cracked. In others it softens unexpectedly, giving way just enough to shift your balance. You adjust as the group does, finding a rhythm that matches the terrain. The sun lowers slowly, its light now angled, casting a gentle glow that softens the edges of everything it touches. You feel the heat of the day fading, replaced by a cooler presence that settles gradually. The group slows slightly as they approach a stretch of land where the surface becomes uneven, broken by shallow dips and ridges. These small variations create pockets where air collects differently, where temperature shifts just enough to be felt. You step down into one of the dips. The air here is cooler, still, protected from the wind. It is a small difference, but noticeable. The group pauses briefly, not stopping entirely, but allowing their bodies to settle into the change. Some crouch low, resting for a moment before rising again. You remain still for a breath, letting the quiet surround you. There is very little sound here. No rustling leaves, no distant calls, only the faint movement of air across the ground and the soft sound of your own breath. It feels vast, empty in one sense, but not without presence. You continue walking your steps slow and steady. Ahead, the land shifts again, rising slightly into a stretch of uneven rock. The surface reflects the fading light, creating soft highlights that shimmer briefly as you move. The group climbs carefully, their feet finding stable ground among the loose stones. You follow, placing each step with attention. At the top, the view opens wide once more. The horizon stretches out uninterrupted, fading into a soft haze where land meets sky. The light continues to change, deepening in colour. Warm tones settle across the earth, blending into cooler shades as the distance increases. You feel a quiet calm settle within you. The movement, the rhythm, the steady progression through changing land, it all begins to feel familiar. The group begins to descend again, moving toward a slightly darker stretch where the ground dips once more. As you follow, you notice small marks along the surface. Faint lines, subtle impressions, not as clear as footprints, but signs of movement. You kneel briefly, touching the ground. The soil feels loose, shifting slightly under your fingers. Something has passed through here. Not recently, but not long ago either. You stand again, your attention moving outward. The group has noticed as well. Their pace slows just enough to take in the surroundings. No urgency, just awareness. You walk on the light, continuing to soften as the sun lowers further. The air cools gradually, carrying a faint hint of something distant. Perhaps water, perhaps vegetation beyond what you can see. The group angles slightly in that direction, their movement adjusting almost without thought. It becomes clear that even here, in a place that feels open and sparse, there are paths, not marked in obvious ways, but known, felt, followed through memory and experience. You continue your steps, steady or breathing calm. The ground beneath you shifts once more, becoming slightly more compact as you move forward. The air carries a new scent now, subtle, but present. You notice how the group responds. Their pace steadies, their direction firm. They are moving towards something, not visible yet, but understood. The sky begins to change again, the light fading gently toward evening. Colours soften, edges blur. The world settles into a quieter state. You walk with them, your body moving in rhythm, your thoughts slowing with the fading light. And as you move through this wide, quiet land shaped by dryness and distance, you begin to understand how survival here depends not on control, but on constant awareness, on listening to the smallest changes, on feeling the subtle shifts in ground air and light, and allowing those quiet signals to guide each step forward. You continue forward with the group, the fading light wrapping softly around the land. The sky shifts into deeper shades, now warm gold slowly blending into quiet blue. The air cools against your skin, carrying a gentle stillness that settles into your breathing. The ground beneath your feet feels more familiar again, less uneven than before, though still shaped by small rises and dips. Your steps fall naturally into rhythm, matching those ahead of you. As you walk, your attention drifts towards something you have sensed throughout the journey, but have not fully focused on: the children. They move among the group, not separate, not protected in the way you might expect, but fully part of the flow. Their steps are shorter, their movements less steady at times, but they keep pace. You notice one child walking slightly ahead, then falling back, then moving again, adjusting instinctively. There is no strict guidance, no hand held at every step, and yet they are not alone. An adult glances toward them from time to time, adjusting their own pace slightly, creating a space that allows the child to move safely within it. It is subtle, easy to miss, but constant. You slow slightly, watching more closely. The child bends down, suddenly picking something from the ground. A small stone, smooth and rounded. They turn it in their hand, examining it with quiet curiosity. After a moment, they drop it and move on. The action is simple, but it carries something important: exploration. Learning does not begin with instruction. It begins with attention, with touch, with curiosity about the smallest things. You continue walking, your gaze moving between the group and the land. Another child lingers near the edge of the path, watching as an adult uses a tool to break apart a piece of plant matter. The child imitates the motion with their own hands, less precise, but clearly intentional. The adult does not correct them, doesn't stop them. The movement is allowed. Over time, through repeated moments like this, skill begins to form, not through explanation, but through doing, through watching, through trying again. You might notice how different this feels from structured learning today. There are no clear lessons, no set times for teaching. Everything happens within the flow of daily life. Every action becomes an example, every movement a quiet instruction. You step over a small ridge in the ground, your foot brushing against loose soil that shifts slightly beneath you. The group adjusts around it, each person moving with practiced ease. The children do the same. Not perfectly, but close enough. You notice how they watch the adults carefully, not constantly, not with full attention at every moment, but often enough that patterns begin to settle in. A way of stepping, a way of holding balance, a way of moving through space. All of it absorbed gradually. The light continues to soften the sky, deepening as evening approaches. The air carries a faint chill now, not strong but enough to be felt. You see one child pull their covering closer around their shoulders, mimicking the adults nearby. Another adjust their pace, moving closer to the center of the group. Position matters. Even at this age, there is an awareness of where it is safest to be. You continue walking your own steps, steady your breathing, calm. The land ahead remains open, though small clusters of plants begin to appear more frequently again, hinting at a change in terrain. The group does not stop. They move with quiet certainty, guided by knowledge that has been built over many journeys like this. You watch as one child stumbles slightly, their foot catching on a small stone. The movement is brief, quickly corrected. An adult nearby slows just enough to allow the child to regain balance, then continues. No words, no interruption, just adjustment. Support without pause. You might not expect such fluid care, but it fits. The group moves as a whole, each person influencing the others in small ways. The children grow within this movement, learning not only how to survive, but how to be part of something larger. The ground beneath you becomes slightly softer as you move forward, holding faint impressions of recent steps. The air shifts again, carrying a hint of moisture. You feel it before you see anything change. The group adjusts direction slightly, their path bending toward a place not yet visible. You follow your attention, still resting on the quiet presence of the children among them. They do not lead. They do not follow entirely. They exist within the flow shaped by it, and over time they will become part of the knowledge that guides the group forward. The sky darkens further now, the last light stretching across the horizon in soft, fading colours. You continue walking your steps slow and even, and as you move through this quiet evening landscape, you begin to understand that learning here is not separate from life. It is life, carried in every step, in every glance, in every small act repeated again and again until it becomes part of who they are. You continue forward as the last light of the day settles into a softer glow, the sky slowly deepening above you. The colours fade, gently blending into shades of quiet blue and grey. The air cools further, brushing lightly against your skin with each step. The group does not stop. They move with the same steady rhythm, though their pace eases slightly as the light dims. The land becomes less defined now, its edges softened by the fading brightness. Shapes blur together and your eyes adjust slowly to the changing scene. The sounds begin to shift. Daytime movement gives way to something quieter, more subtle. The faint rustle of dry grass, the distant echo of something moving unseen, the low hum of insects rising gently in the cooling air. You listen, really listen. Without the brightness of day, sound becomes clearer, more noticeable. You hear the soft crunch of feet against the ground, the brushing of coverings as bodies move, the quiet exhale of breath from those walking ahead of you. Each sound carries its own space. Nothing overlaps too much. Nothing rushes. The group slows slightly as they move into a stretch of land where the ground feels smoother beneath your feet. The surface here holds less debris, fewer stones, making each step quieter. You notice how this changes the way everyone moves. Less caution with each step, more ease, but still aware, always aware. A faint call rises in the distance. Low, drawn out. It lingers for a moment, then fades. You pause slightly, your head tilting as you try to locate it. The group reacts as well, though not with alarm, just attention. One individual turns their head slightly, listening more closely, then continues walking. The sound does not return, but its presence remains, a reminder that the land is never empty. You continue forward, your senses adjusting to the night. The sky darkens further and the first stars begin to appear faint at first, then clearer as the light fades completely. You glance upward. The sky feels vast again, filled with more detail than it held during the day. Without artificial light, every point of brightness stands out. The group does not look up often. Their attention remains grounded, but the sky is always there, steady, constant. You might find yourself wondering how much it guides them. Not in a precise way, not like a map, but as a pattern. Something that remains the same when everything else shifts. You walk on your steps, steady or breathing slow. The ground beneath you cools the warmth of the day, leaving it gradually. You feel the difference with each step. The air carries new scents now. Dampness, earth, something distant that suggests water or thicker vegetation. The group adjusts direction, slightly turning toward it. The movement is subtle but consistent. They are following something, not visible, but known. You follow your attention, focused on the quiet signals around you. The land dips gently, forming a shallow curve that holds cooler air. The temperature drops just enough to be noticeable. You step into it, feeling the stillness settle around you. The breeze softens here, shielded by the shape of the land. The sounds shift again. Closer now, more contained. You hear the faint movement of small creatures in the brush, the soft brushing of leaves against one another, the quiet presence of life continuing in the dark. The group slows further, not stopping completely, but easing into a calmer pace. This is a different kind of movement, less about covering distance, more about finding the right place. You notice how the individuals begin to draw slightly closer together, their spacing tightening just enough to feel more connected. The darkness changes everything. Visibility decreases. Awareness shifts. The group becomes the center. You feel it too. Your attention turning inward toward the shared space rather than outward into the distance. A small glow appears ahead. Faint at first, then clearer. Fire. Another place of pause. The group moves toward it, their steps steady, their bodies relaxed in recognition. As you approach, the warmth begins to reach you again, soft and steady. The light flickers against the ground, casting gentle shadows that move with the flame. You step into the circle of light, feeling the difference immediately. The darkness remains beyond it, but here there is warmth, visibility, presence. The group gathers once more, settling into the familiar pattern. Some sit. Others remain standing for a moment longer. The sounds of the night continue beyond the light, but they feel more distant now, contained. You sit down slowly, your body relaxing as the warmth settles into you again. The ground feels firm beneath you, the air balanced between cool and warm. The fire crackles softly, a steady rhythm that blends with the quiet of the night. You listen to the fire, to the breathing around you, to the distant world beyond, and as you sit there surrounded by the gentle sounds of the natural world, you begin to understand how deeply early human life is connected to these quiet rhythms. Sound, light, temperature, all guiding movement, all shaping each moment, without words, without explanation, just presence. You sit near the fire, letting its warmth settle into your hands as the night deepens around you. The flames move slowly now, rising and folding into themselves, casting soft light that reaches only a short distance before fading into darkness. The group gathers close, though not tightly. Each person finds their place without needing to search for it. Some sit low to the ground, others rest against nearby stones, or lean slightly forward, watching the fire in quiet stillness. The night feels calm, not silent but steady. Beyond the light, faint sounds continue. A distant rustle, the soft movement of something passing through the dark, the low whisper of wind touching the ground and moving on. Closer to you there is another kind of sound. Breathing, slow, even, shared. You shift slightly, adjusting your position so that the warmth reaches your legs more fully. The ground beneath you feels firm, holding a trace of heat from earlier in the day. Across from you, two individuals sit close together, their shoulders nearly touching. One leans slightly toward the other, their posture relaxed, their attention drifting between the fire and the space around them. No words are exchanged, none are needed. A small movement catches your eye. One person reaches forward, picking up a piece of wood, turning it slowly in their hands before placing it into the fire. The flames respond gently, growing just enough to brighten the circle. The light shifts across faces, across hands, across the ground. Everything moves in soft patterns. You notice how the group remains aware of one another. Even in stillness, a slight shift from one person leads to a small adjustment from another. A change in posture, a glance, a movement that keeps the balance of the group intact. It is quiet cooperation, not directed, not spoken, just present. You feel it too, though you're only observing. A sense that each person here is part of something shared. The fire continues to burn steady and calm. You lean forward slightly, resting your arms on your knees, letting your gaze soften as you watch the movement of the flames. Time feels slower now, stretched, unmeasured. One individual lifts their hand, brushing lightly against another's arm, a brief touch that carries familiarity. The gesture is returned in a small way, a shift closer, a quiet acknowledgement. Connection exists here in these small actions. Nothing dramatic, nothing emphasized, just part of being together. You glance toward the edge of the light. The darkness remains, holding the unknown beyond its reach. But within the circle there is a sense of steadiness, of enough. You notice how no one moves too far away. Even those who sit slightly apart remain within sight, within the soft glow that keeps everyone connected. The group begins to settle further. Bodies lower, movements slow. Some lie down, pulling their coverings closer, adjusting them against the cool of the night air. Others remain seated a little longer, watching, listening. The fire becomes the center once again, not just for warmth, but for presence. You lie back slowly, letting your body rest against the ground. The surface feels firm but not uncomfortable. Small bits of earth press gently against you, grounding you in place. Above the sky stretches wide, filled with stars that seem sharper now against the deep darkness. You watch them for a moment, then your gaze returns to the fire. The light flickers, casting soft shadows that move across the group. Faces relax, eyes close. Breathing deepens. The sounds of the night continue, but they no longer feel distant. They become part of the background, blending with the quiet of the group, a steady rhythm. You feel your own body settling further. Your breathing slows, your muscles release their tension. The warmth of the fire reaches you, balanced by the cool air that surrounds it. Everything feels in place. The group rests together, not in perfect stillness, but in a shared calm. A small shift here, a quiet breath there. Nothing breaks the rhythm. You notice how even in rest there is awareness. Someone near the edge of the group remains slightly upright, their posture alert, their attention moving between the fire and the darkness beyond. A quiet watch, not tense, just present. The fire lowers gradually, the flames becoming smaller, softer. The light dims slightly but does not disappear. It holds just enough. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. To the fire, to the breathing, to the distant world that continues beyond the light. And as you lie there surrounded by the quiet presence of others, you begin to feel how deeply cooperation is woven into this life. Not through planning, not through instruction, but through shared space, shared rhythm, shared awareness. You open your eyes once more, watching the last gentle movements of the flames, and in this quiet circle of light you understand that survival here is not only about strength or skill, it is about being together, in stillness, in movement, in every moment that passes without needing to be named. You wake slowly, though it is hard to tell exactly when sleep gave way to awareness. The fire is still there, though smaller, now reduced to a soft glow, with only the occasional flicker rising from beneath the ash. The air feels cooler. Night has settled, fully wrapping the land in a quiet stillness that feels deeper than before. You remain lying where you are, your body warm on one side, cooled gently by the open air on the other. Around you, the group rests in scattered positions, each person settled into their own space, yet still part of the whole. There is a soft rhythm to it, breathing, occasional movement, the faint shift of someone adjusting their position. Nothing abrupt, nothing loud, just life continuing in its quietest form. You lift your head slightly, looking toward the center of the group. The fire glows steadily, its light softer now, casting low gentle shadows that barely move. Nearby one individual remains awake. They sit upright, their posture relaxed but attentive, their gaze drifting slowly between the fire and the darkness beyond. A quiet watch, not rigid, not tense, just present. You let your head rest again, your eyes adjusting to the dim light. The sky above is filled with stars, more than you can count, each one steady and clear in the absence of anything artificial. The darkness feels complete, but not empty. There is always something within it. A faint sound reaches you, a soft rustle far beyond the circle of light. You listen, your attention sharpening just slightly. The sound fades. Nothing follows. The watcher does not move. They have heard it too, but there is no alarm. Only awareness. You feel your body relax again, your breathing slow and steady. Time passes in a way that is difficult to measure. Moments stretch, then drift, then settle. At some point the watcher shifts slightly, leaning forward to adjust a piece of wood in the fire. A faint crackle follows, and a small flame rises briefly before settling back down. The light brightens just enough to reveal the shapes around you more clearly. You notice how the coverings have been pulled close, wrapped around shoulders and bodies, creating small pockets of warmth. Even in sleep the body adjusts, seeking comfort, maintaining balance. You shift slightly as well, drawing your arms closer, feeling the cool air brush against your skin before the warmth returns. The ground beneath you holds a faint memory of heat, enough to keep the chill from settling too deeply. Another sound drifts in closer this time. A low movement through grass. You remain still listening. The watcher turns their head slightly, their attention focused outward. The sound continues for a moment, then stops. Silence returns. No reaction follows. No movement from the group. The balance holds. You begin to notice something else. Even in rest there is a structure here. Not planned, not spoken, but present. Some sleep more deeply. Others remain lighter, their awareness never fully fading. The group protects itself through this quiet rotation of attention, without needing to decide, without needing to speak. It happens naturally. You close your eyes again, letting the sounds of the night settle into the background. Your breathing slows, your thoughts drift. The warmth of the fire, the presence of the group, the steady rhythm of the environment all blend together. Nothing demands action, nothing interrupts, only stillness. After a time you open your eyes once more. The sky has shifted slightly, the stars moving slowly across it, marking the passage of time in a way that feels both subtle and constant. The fire has lowered further, now more glow than flame. The watcher has changed. Another now sits in that place, their posture calm, their gaze steady. The transition must have happened quietly without drawing attention. You might not have noticed if you had not looked. The group remains at rest, breathing, shifting, present. The air begins to change again, just slightly, a hint of something new, coolness that carries the first suggestion of morning. You feel it on your skin, a faint shift that signals what is coming next. The night is not ending yet, but it is beginning to move. You remain still, letting your body rest as long as it can. The ground, the air, the quiet presence of others all hold you in place. And as you lie there between sleep and waking, you begin to understand how even rest is part of survival. Not separate from it, not a break from it, but woven into it. A time when the body recovers, when awareness softens but does not disappear, when the group remains together even in stillness. You take a slow breath, feeling the cool air fill your lungs. Then release it, letting it fade into the quiet. The fire glows softly. The night holds steady. And for a while longer, everything remains exactly as it is. You begin to wake again more fully this time as the air shifts with the first quiet signs of morning. The darkness softens just enough for shapes to return. The sky above you is no longer deep black, but a muted grey that slowly gathers light. The fire has nearly faded, reduced to a bed of glowing embers. A faint warmth still rises from it, though it no longer reaches as far as it did before. Around you, the group begins to stir. Not all at once. A slow return to movement. Someone shifts, pulling their covering aside. Another sits up, stretching their arms in a small, unhurried motion. The watcher remains in place for a moment longer, then leans forward, adding a small piece of wood to the embers. A thin flame appears again, flickering gently. You push yourself up from the ground, brushing away the bits of soil that cling lightly to your hands. The surface feels cool now, the memory of warmth fading with the night. The air carries a different scent. Fresh. Damp! Something has changed. You take a slow breath, noticing how the smell lingers near the ground. The group begins to move outward from the fire, their attention shifting to the land around them. There is no delay, no long pause after rest. The rhythm continues. You stand and follow your steps, slower at first, then steady. As the light grows, the details of the landscape return. The ground appears darker in patches, holding moisture from the night. Small drops cling to the edges of plants, catching the faint light as it spreads. The group moves toward a low stretch of land nearby where the soil looks softer and slightly disturbed. You step closer and notice what they see. Small plants, not scattered randomly but growing in a loose cluster. Their leaves are young, pale, reaching upward. One individual kneels, touching the ground gently near the base of one of the plants. Their fingers press into the soil, testing its softness. Then, instead of pulling the plant free, they leave it. You watch closely. Others do the same. They move through the area, examining, touching, but not taking everything. A few plants are gathered, but many are left behind. It feels different from earlier, more selective, more careful. You crouch down, bringing your hand near the soil. It is softer here, easier to move aside. You notice how the ground has been disturbed before, not deeply, but enough to suggest repeated attention. This place has been used, not just once, more than that. The group moves slowly through the patch, their actions quiet and deliberate. Some plants are taken, others are not. The pattern is not random. You begin to notice small signs. The plants that are left are smaller, not yet ready. The ones that are gathered are more developed. There is a sense of timing here, an understanding of growth. You remain still for a moment, watching as one individual gently presses soil back into place after removing a plant. The movement is light, almost absent-minded, but it leaves the ground smoother than before. Nothing dramatic, just a small action. But it changes something. You might not think much of it at first, but as you watch, the pattern continues. Take some, leave some, move on. The group does not stay long. This is not a place to settle, but it is not simply passed through either. There is interaction, subtle, repeated. You stand and follow as they begin to move again, leaving the patch behind. The sun rises further, its light spreading across the land, bringing warmth back to the air. The moisture begins to lift, fading slowly as the ground dries. You glance back briefly. The plants remain, not untouched, but not removed entirely. Something continues there, something that will change with time. You walk on your thoughts, lingering on that quiet moment. The way the group moved through the space, the way they chose, the way they left it. There is no clear boundary here, no sudden shift from one way of life to another, just small changes, repeated, over and over. The land responds, slowly. The group continues forward their pace, steady their attention, already moving to what lies ahead. But you carry that image with you, the soft soil, the young plants, the quiet decision to take only what is needed. And as you walk, you begin to feel how something new is beginning to form. Not fully shaped, not fully understood, but present. A different way of relating to the land, not only moving across it, but touching it, changing it, in ways that are small at first, almost unnoticeable, but steady. You continue forward, your steps falling into rhythm once more, the path ahead opening gently before you. And behind you the land holds that small change, waiting, growing, becoming something more over time. The ground stretches ahead in a gentle sweep, the early light now fully settled across the land. Warmth returns, slowly soaking into the soil, lifting the faint dampness left behind by the night. The air feels softer again, carrying a quiet stillness that settles round everything. Footsteps continue in their steady rhythm. The group moves forward without pause, though something in the pace feels slightly altered. Not slower, not faster, just different in a way that is difficult to name. The land begins to change once more. At first it shows itself in small ways. The ground appears more worn in certain places, the surface smoother, as if pressed down again and again over time. The plants grow in patterns that feel less scattered, gathering in certain areas more than others. Clusters form, not by accident. There is a sense of repetition here, a place that has been returned to. You follow along the same path, your feet settling into the shallow impressions left by those ahead of you. The soil holds the shape for just a moment before shifting again, softening under the pressure. A low rise appears, shaped not only by the land but by movement across it. Beyond it something becomes visible, not a shelter in the simple sense you saw before, something more consistent. The group moves toward it without hesitation. The shapes ahead take form as you draw closer. Structures, still made of branches, still built from what the land provides but arranged with greater intention. Several stand near one another, their forms more defined, their placement less scattered. They remain simple, but there is a sense that they belong together. A space shaped not just for a moment but for return. You step closer, your gaze moving across the area. The ground here carries more signs of use. Pressed soil, small fragments of plant material, faint traces of fire from earlier gatherings. This place has held people before, not just once. More than that, the group begins to spread out within the space, each person moving in a familiar way, as if recognizing their place without needing to search for it. Some approach the structures, adjusting branches, shifting materials that have loosened over time. Others move toward a central area where the ground darkens slightly, a sign of past fires. You step into one of the spaces, feeling the difference immediately. The ground is smoother here, less uneven, more settled, a quiet comfort in the way it supports your weight. The structure above you offers shade, though not complete, allowing light to filter through in soft patterns. Nothing is sealed, nothing is permanent, but it holds together. You turn slowly, taking in the arrangement. Each structure stands close enough to the others to form a loose circle, leaving a space at the center, a place for gathering, for warmth, for shared presence. The group moves through it with quiet familiarity. This is not a place found by chance. It is known, returned to, held in memory. You walk toward the center where the ground shows signs of repeated use. Ashes pressed into the soil. Small stones form a loose boundary, not placed precisely, but arranged enough to suggest purpose. A fire will be built here again. It has been built here before. You feel the stillness of the place. Not empty, not quiet in the way of untouched land, but filled with the traces of past moments. You lower yourself to the ground, letting your hand brush lightly across the surface. It feels compact, worn, a place shaped by presence. Around you movement continues, Someone adjusts a covering along the edge of a structure, securing it more tightly. Another gathers loose material, placing it where it will be needed later. These actions are small, but repeated. They build something, not in a single moment, but over time. You notice how the group does not prepare to leave immediately. There is no sense of brief pause here. Instead, there is a settling. Bodies relax more fully. Movements slow further. The space allows it. You remain where you are, watching the quiet adjustments, the way each person contributes without direction, without command. The place holds them, and they hold it in return. The air carries a faint warmth now, the sun rising higher, the light strengthening. Shadows shift across the ground, moving slowly as time passes. You sit in that space, feeling the difference. Movement has led here, repeatedly, and now for a while it pauses, not completely, but enough to change the rhythm. The land here is not only crossed, it is used, remembered, returned to. You glance outward beyond the circle of structures. The wider world remains, open, unpredictable. But within this space there is a different feeling, something closer to staying, even if only for a short time. You rest your hands on the ground beside you, feeling its firmness, its quiet stability. And in that moment something begins to take shape. Not a sudden change, not a clear shift, but a gradual one. A way of living that holds movement and return together. That allows a place to become familiar, to become part of the rhythm. You remain still, letting that sense settle as the group moves around you, shaping the space in small, steady ways. The light settles fully across the space, filling the open center and slipping gently through the gaps in the structures around you. The warmth builds slowly, not harsh, just enough to soften the coolness left behind by the night. Movement continues, though it carries a different tone now, less wandering. More purpose held within a smaller area. Someone brings a bundle of gathered plants toward the center, placing it carefully on the ground. Another kneels nearby, separating pieces with steady hands, arranging them into smaller groups. Nothing feels rushed. Each motion follows naturally from the one before it. You remain seated for a moment, watching the pattern form. Then you rise and step toward the edge of the space where the ground meets the open land again. The difference is clear. Inside, the earth is pressed and shaped. Outside, it stretches wide and untouched. The line between the two is not marked, but it is felt. You turn back. The group continues their quiet work. A piece of wood is placed at the center, then another forming the base for a new fire. Hands move with familiarity, adjusting angles, leaving space between each piece. Soon a small flame appears, catching slowly, then growing just enough to hold. The smoke lifts straight upward before drifting with the breeze. The fire returns to its place, at the center, drawing everything inward again. You step closer, feeling the warmth begin to spread. It changes the space immediately. Light flickers across the ground. Shadows move gently along the edges of the structures. Everything feels more connected. Nearby, someone brings a piece of stone and begins to shape it, striking it carefully against another. The sound is soft but steady, repeating at even intervals. A rhythm forms, different from the fire, different from footsteps, but part of the same quiet world. Fragments fall to the ground, collecting in small clusters. Each strike shifts the shape just slightly. Gradual change, built through repetition. You watch for a moment, then move on your attention, drawn to another part of the space. Near the edge, a small pile of materials rests, branches, fibers, pieces of hide. Someone kneels there, tying two pieces together with careful movements. The knot holds. The structure tightens. Small adjustments make it stronger. Every part of this place carries signs of use, not just presence, but continuation. You walk slowly through the space, your steps lighter now on the compact ground. The sounds around you blend together. Fire, stone, movement, breathing. Nothing stands apart. Everything fits. You pause near one of the structures, reaching out to touch its surface. The material feels worn, smoothed by repeated contact. This place has been shaped over time, not built all at once, not planned in a single moment, but formed through return, through use, through quiet attention. A figure passes by, carrying something gathered from beyond the space. They place it near the center, adding to what is already there. The collection grows. Not scattered, not random. Arranged, held. You stand there watching as the pieces come together. Food, tools, materials. Each one placed with purpose, you notice how little is left behind outside the space. Most things are brought inward, gathered, kept close. It changes the way the group moves. Less distance between actions. More connection between tasks. You take a slow breath, feeling the air move through the space. It carries warmth scent, a sense of presence that lingers. The wider land still stretches beyond. Open! Unpredictable. But here there is something else. A center, a place that holds. The sun climbs higher and the light grows stronger, settling across everything. Time moves quietly, measured not by numbers but by change. The fire burns steadily. The tools take shape. The materials are arranged. Nothing feels separate. Everything builds on what came before. You step back slightly, taking in the full space. The structures, the fire. The people moving within it. It feels different from the earlier moments. Less temporary, more grounded. Still simple, still shaped by the land, but held together in a new way. You feel it settle around you. A shift that is not sudden but steady. Something forming, not fully complete, but already present. You turn your gaze outward once more toward the open horizon. The land beyond remains vast, full of movement, full of change, but here within this space something begins to anchor. You stand quietly, letting that feeling remain, and as the group continues their steady work shaping the space through small repeated actions, you begin to sense how the edge of something new is near. Not a clear line, not a sudden beginning, but a slow arrival. You remain within the space as the day continues to unfold, the warmth of the sun settling evenly across the ground. The air feels steady, balanced between heat and movement, carrying faint traces of smoke and earth. Nothing rushes here. The group moves through the space in a quiet rhythm, each action flowing into the next. A tool is shaped, then set aside. Food is arranged, then shared. Materials are adjusted, then left in place for later use. Everything feels connected. Time passes without being measured. The fire remains at the center, its steady presence holding the space together. The light it gives blends with the sun, less noticeable now, but still important. You step slowly toward the edge once more, your feet pressing into the familiar ground. The soil beneath you feels shaped, no longer untouched, carrying the imprint of repeated movement. Beyond it, the wider land stretches outward, unchanged, endless. You stand there for a moment, feeling the difference between the two. Inside there is pattern. Outside there is possibility. The group continues their work behind you, the sounds soft and steady. You turn back, watching them move. There is no clear leader, no single direction given, and yet everything aligns. Each person contributes in their own way, their actions fitting together without needing to be spoken. It is a kind of order, not forced, not planned in advance, but built through repetition, through shared understanding. You move closer to the center, again lowering yourself to sit near the fire. The warmth reaches you gently, a familiar comfort that feels almost constant now. Nearby, someone places another piece of wood onto the fire. The flames rise slightly, then settle again, continuing their steady movement. You watch the light flicker across the ground, across hands, across the simple shapes of the structures. This place feels held, not permanent, not fixed, but stable in its own way. You notice how the materials gathered earlier remain close. Nothing is scattered. Everything has a place, even if that place is not clearly defined. It is enough. The group does not prepare to leave. Not yet. There is a pause here that extends longer than before. A staying. You feel it in the way bodies relax more fully, in the way movement slows without stopping. This is not the endless walking of earlier moments. This is something else, a different rhythm. You rest your hands against the ground, feeling its firmness, its quiet steadiness beneath you. The land here has been shaped, not dramatically, not in ways that stand out from a distance, but enough to change how it feels, enough to hold the presence of those who return to it. You glance around once more. The structures, the fire, the gathered materials, the people moving within the space. Each element fits together. Each one supports the others. And slowly, without needing to name it, you begin to sense what is forming. A beginning, not of everything, but of something new, a way of living that allows return, that allows memory to stay in one place, that allows the land to become more than something passed through. You remain there, letting that understanding settle quietly within you. The light shifts again as the sun begins its slow descent, casting longer shadows across the space. The air cools just slightly. The rhythm continues, but now it holds something more. You take a slow breath, feeling the moment stretch gently. And as you sit within this space at the quiet edge between movement and stillness, you begin to understand how the world is changing. Not suddenly, not loudly, but in small, steady ways. The kind that build over time, the kind that shape everything that follows. You let your gaze soften the details of the space blending gently together. The fire continues. The group remains. The land holds it all. And as the light fades slowly toward evening, the scene settles into a calm that feels both complete and just beginning. The light softens even further now, slipping gently across the land as the day begins to settle into night once more. The warmth fades, slowly replaced by a cool stillness that wraps around everything. You remain where you are, your body relaxed, your breathing slow. The fire glows quietly, its light softer than before, just enough to hold the space together. Around you, the group settles again. Some lie down. Others remain seated, their movement slower now, their attention drifting between the fire and the quiet darkness beyond. The world feels calm, steady, complete in its own quiet way. Above the sky deepens the first stars, returning one by one, filling the space with a soft, distant glow. Nothing rushes, nothing demands. The land rests, the people rest, and you feel yourself drifting with it, your thoughts slowing, your awareness softening. The journey has carried you far, across open plains, through shifting lands, into moments of stillness, of movement, of quiet change, and now everything settles. The fire dims, the sounds fade, the air cools gently. You take one last slow breath, letting it pass through you without effort. And as the night deepens, the world becomes softer, quieter, more distant. You remain there, held within the calm as the story fades into the quiet rhythm of the land itself. Sweet dreams,